Lies of P's greatest strength is how it subverts your existing expectations. I feel strongly the need to say upfront here in the second sentence of this video that I am not someone who typically enjoys this genre of game. It's really a testament to Lies of P's art direction and style that I was intrigued enough to check it out. It's then also a testament to its story, world building, and yes, combat that I continued playing until the game's ending, the DLC's ending, and even further into New Game Plus. Saying it again, I am not someone who enjoys this genre of games. Souls-likes. I've tried to play several, but always get frustrated at the difficulty, and with the minimalist nature of the stories, it often left little for me to grasp onto to push forward. I want to be clear that I haven't played all Souls-likes, and with the ones that I have played, perhaps I didn't put enough hours in order for the stories to begin getting good, or to simply start. While this is possible, it's my understanding from listening to the community that the games in this genre aren't about the story. Little bits of lore might be there in the descriptions of items or weapons, but that you shouldn't play this genre for the story. Well, stories or interesting world building are why I play games. Gameplay is mostly second. These statements aren't meant to offend anyone or their favorite game, but rather to help me better explain my point, which is this. I loved Lies of P, and that was a pleasant surprise for me. It subverted my own expectations about the genre. I was looking for a compelling narrative, and Lies of P delivered on that, providing more to experience outside of just how tough the game was. This points to something important. Lies of P isn't just a great Souls-like made for that fanbase. It's a great game, period, for everyone. So that's what this is, a video made by someone who isn't a Souls veteran, but who wants to share why he ended up enjoying this particular game in the genre so much. The video will exclusively focus on Lies of P and its expansion Overture, and will not include discussion on any of the other games in the genre. You can think of it as a guided tour through the game where I give my personal commentary as well as analysis throughout. Primary topics are the narrative, lore, world design, levels, bosses, game mechanics, as well as the original Adventures of Pinocchio story that the game draws inspiration from. This video is written in a way so that if you haven't played Lies of P, you will still be able to understand everything. However, I do want to encourage those of you watching who might be intrigued by Lies of P but hesitant, just like I was, to please give it a shot first. The game is better experienced for yourself before watching this video, and you might end up loving it just like I did. One final note is that chapters corresponding to the different levels can be found on the video's timeline in order to make it easier to watch this video in pieces. As I stated, Lies of P's greatest strength is in subverting expectations. It does this right from the opening with its credit to the author Carlo Collodi, writer of the Adventure of Pinocchio kids story that the Disney movie and this game are based on. Prior to playing Lies of P, I was unaware these stories existed and had assumed the 1940s Disney movie was the original story. Regardless, most people who play this game will likely have some level of baseline knowledge and expectation about the story and characters. Pinocchio being a puppet, Geppetto being his creator, the blue fairy, lying causing his nose to grow, Jiminy Cricket, and the desire to become a real boy. Because of this prior knowledge, educated guesses can be made about events throughout Lies of P, and the story is at its best when it plays with these expectations and the source material in clever ways. The Adventures of Pinocchio book actually exists in-game.
Have you ever heard the fairy tale about a mischievous wooden puppet? All of Krat knows the story, all because of someone who loved that story more than anyone else.
It's clear Geppetto was inspired by that story within this story. Although this creates a bit of a snake eating its tail situation in my opinion, because it doesn't explain how other aspects of that original story, like the Blue Fairy, the Red Fox, and Alidoro, exist unless everyone in this world is just cosplaying this kid's book. Its presence in this world detracts from the world a bit for me. The brief opening cutscene shows a glowing blue butterfly bringing a puppet to life.
Geppetto's puppet. We need your help.
An important note here is that the player's character is never referred to in-game as Pinocchio, only as Geppetto's puppet. While it's clear to me that your character is supposed to be this universe's version of Pinocchio, to be consistent, I'll just refer to him as P throughout this video. P awakens and we are quickly given control. There's no character creator and only a little bit of customization with picking your starting weapon. The female voice from earlier goes on to introduce herself as Sophia and requests that P make his way to a place called Hotel Krat so that the pair can meet in person. As you exit the train car, you find a lantern and Sophia refers to it as Gemini. Outside of the obvious nod to Jiminy Cricket, it's never confirmed exactly what Gemini is. The lantern itself is a puppet model designed to serve as a guide to the city, but Gemini himself appears to be an awakened puppet similar to P. He's mainly there to provide narrative and lore commentary. The game's first area is the Krat City Central Station, and it teaches the basics of gameplay and combat. The first few puppet enemies in the area are simple and allow for players to practice their light and heavy sword swings, as well as learn about stamina usage and recovery. Within the train station, you obtain an item called a pulse cell, which allows you to heal. You have a limited number of uses, and they only replenish when you die or interact with a checkpoint. The game throws a lot of gameplay tutorial prompts at you as you move through the station, and it's a bit overwhelming on a first playthrough. Having said that, even if you've never played a Souls-like, many of these gameplay mechanics have bled over in some way to other genres, so they're likely familiar. Dodging, guarding, and parrying are your defensive options in combat, with parrying being the most difficult to do properly. You're taught how to perform a rear fatal attack on a puppet that has its back to you, and this is the only tutorial that isn't communicated well enough in my opinion. These attacks are a series of strikes that deal a lot of damage, a reward for getting behind the enemy. As you can see in the footage, I approach and the only direction I have is to hit R1 when behind the enemy. I do this and just perform a regular attack. There's a second enemy to practice on a bit further, and I did execute the fatal attack that time, even though in my mind I had just repeated what I did the first time. This left me confused about what I did wrong the first time, but apparently not the second, something that wouldn't get cleared up for me until several chapters later. The missing information is that you need to get close enough for a specific orange hash mark to appear on the enemy, which will activate the fatal attack. Soon after this, you'll fight your first larger enemy, a policeman puppet, and during this fight, players should also get the staggering tutorial. Every enemy has an invisible meter that builds as you attack and parry them. Once that meter has filled, a white outline will appear around their health bar, and hitting them with a charged heavy attack will down the enemy for several seconds. This allows for a fatal attack to be performed for free damage. All of the policeman's attacks can be easily dodged, and I think it'll provide little challenge even for new players. Outside the station is the first Stargazer. Throughout the world, players will repair broken devices called Stargazers that serve as teleporters, upgrade stations, and most importantly, places to respawn. A core part of the Souls-like genre is its death mechanics. When you die, you drop all of your accumulated and unspent experience points at the spot of your death and revive back at your most recently activated Stargazer. Your health and pulse cells are all recovered, but at the cost that most enemies respawn as well. You typically fight back to where you died and reclaim your experience points. This is where unlocking doors or finding shortcuts in levels comes into play. The shortcuts allow you to bypass areas rather than having to fight through all enemies every single time. This cycle is what many people love about the Souls-like genre, and I generally enjoy it as well. This Stargazer is the first chance players have to spend some of their experience points, called Ergo, to level up their attributes. For my playthroughs, I mostly stuck to increasing health, stamina, and carrying capacity. I mostly used technique-based weaponry, which is this game's equivalent to dexterity, so faster weapons. We're still not done with the tutorials, by the way. We're taught that for certain attacks, an enemy will glow red, indicating that their upcoming attack cannot be guarded and must instead either be dodged or parried. We learn about Fable Arts, which are special attacks that you have access to that depend on which blade and handle you are using for your weapon. Triggering them uses pieces of the blue segmented bar under your health and stamina, with different attacks using different amounts. This is a mechanic I didn't explore as deeply as I wish I did across either of my playthroughs. Next, there's weapon durability, which decreases as you attack and block. It can be easily repaired with a grinder item that you start the game with, but must still be managed similar to health and stamina. If the meter reaches 0, the weapon effectively breaks until you visit a Stargazer, meaning it does significantly less damage. My final comment is that throughout this whole area you'll be collecting tons of items. Dim Ergo fragments, Fable Catalyst, Venigni's Urgent Repair Tool, and others that again, as someone essentially new to this genre, felt overwhelming and underexplained, compounded by the confusing menu system. The game never really teaches you about items, navigating the menu, or what your stats mean. It just expects you to figure it out on your own, or not. Despite the initial info dump and confusing menus, I do think Lies of P does a fantastic job of onboarding new players when it comes to its core combat and progression loops. The game's first boss is the Parade Master, and it tests if the player at least partially understands what the game has been teaching. Its first phase is slow with easily readable attacks, and once about half of its health is gone, it enters phase 2, which is faster but with a simpler moveset based around swinging its detached head around. It provides just enough of a challenge that I would guess most new players will use all of their healing charges during the fight and be introduced to the pulse recharge mechanic. Once all of your healing charges have been depleted, you can earn one of them back by dealing damage. It forces you to play offensively in order to earn back a healing charge, and it doesn't allow you to charge up more than one. I like this a lot. After the boss, we go to the game's central hub, Hotel Krat. As you approach the building, Sophia informs you that the hotel's security won't let puppets into the building, and so you'll need to lie in order to get in. This was the first instance of the game flipping the script of the original Pinocchio story. In the short stories as well as movie, lying is bad. It makes his nose grow and indicates to the world that he's dishonest. From a video game standpoint, lying in most games is also bad, earning you negative karma, renegade points, or something similar. Most people will walk into Lies of P believing lying is bad, and that it's something P will be asked to do but must be resisted. It's in the very title of the game. Here I expected that I'd have to figure out an alternative way into the hotel in order to avoid lying, but that option doesn't exist. You have to lie to get in, and immediately afterwards you get a message stating that your springs are reacting. Lying is neither good or evil in the game, and instead it's used as a metric of humanity, as the ability to lie is something unique to humans and not allowed by the puppet's programming. However, here we see that P is special and is somehow able to lie. In this way, the game uses the same themes of the original story, a puppet becoming human and the concept of lying, but then creates a modern and, in my opinion, more interesting interpretation. Lies are the centerpiece of the game's narrative. Almost every character is lying about something, and lies are deeply embedded into the key events of the story. Entering the hotel transitions to the game's opening credits, which provide a brief history of the city and world lore. 30 years prior, a blue crystalline substance was discovered beneath the city by a group known as the Alchemists, and then later used by an inventor named Geppetto as a power source for his mechanical puppets. The mass production of these puppets springboards the town of Krat into an industrial revolution. There's peace and advancement up until recently when the puppets snapped and began attacking civilians. By the end of the game, we learn that many important details were left out of this opening, which is something I enjoyed discovering. It made this opening video feel like propaganda being fed to me from individuals trying to keep the real story quiet. Inside the hotel, we meet Sophia, this universe's version of the Blue Fairy. She immediately gives the next objective to find Geppetto on Elysion Boulevard. There are 3 other characters inside that you can also meet: Lady Antonia, who's the owner of the hotel, Polendina, her butler, and Eugenie, a woman who works in the workshop. I'll discuss each of them and Hotel Krat itself more later, so for now let's continue to Elysion Boulevard. The level has you moving between streets and rooftops, working your way towards the Alchemist Bridge that connects the area to Krat City Hall. This section of town has been locked down and marked a quarantine zone due to an illness that's sweeping through Krat called the Petrification Disease. There are a few sick individuals we can interact with through windows, but gameplay-wise, Elysion Boulevard doesn't offer much outside of reinforcing the combat lessons from the first area. However, players now have access to the last piece of the combat toolkit, Legion arms, which are secondary weapons that utilize P's special prosthetic arm. There are 10 variants in total that can be unlocked in any order as you play, each with different functions. Quickly going through them, the S tier among them is one that functions like a hookshot, either dragging the enemy to you or vice versa. It was useful in every situation the game presented. Below this one, but still firmly excellent, is one that acts like a shield in your left hand, allowing you another method of guarding. Additionally, I would include the 2 from the Overture DLC on this tier. One is a boomerang blade launcher, and another straps a shotgun to your wrist. There's also one that turns your arm into a flamethrower that I quite liked, and so that one's going to go on this tier as well. There are 2 in the group below this. The first releases powerful electric bursts, and the other fires exploding rounds at enemies. Rounding out the bottom tier then would be the default starting arm, which you just punch with, one that sprays acid on the ground, and finally the conceptually cool landmine placing one. With that last one, it was just too situational to be useful for me. The keyword there is "for me." I imagine it's likely someone else who played this game found other arms to be S tier for them and their playstyle. It's why I liked this system so much, because I can imagine this mine-placing arm being a core part of someone else's combat strategy. It just wasn't for me. Despite this, each were fun to experiment with and try out. Legion arms don't use the same stamina as your regular attack. Instead, they use a resource called Legion, meaning they add an additional layer of strategy in combat. And on top of the different arms, each can also be upgraded to enhance and transform their functions. Using the hookshot as an example, its final upgrade allows you to launch yourself above an enemy for a powerful plunge attack. There's also an upgrade later in the game that allows you to have 2 arms equipped at a time, and this really encouraged experimenting with different options while still having your favorite on hand. Pun intended. Now let's return to the story. P reaches the Alchemist Bridge and finds Geppetto hiding from a man wearing a donkey mask.
You know what caused the puppet frenzy, don't you? You're their maker, practically their father. You and the alchemist scheming together. Tell me the truth!
The Mad Donkey isn't a very interesting or difficult fight, but it is significant for a number of reasons. First and foremost is that it's P's first time killing a human. This is important because of something called the Grand Covenant, which are a set of rules encoded into puppets that they must obey.
First law. All puppets must obey their creator's commands. Second law. A puppet may not harm humans. Third law. A puppet protects and serves humans and the city of Krat. Fourth law. A puppet cannot lie.
We've seen P break 2 of these rules, telling a lie and now harming a human. We've also fought through rampaging puppets who appear to be violating the Grand Covenant as well, which is why the Mad Donkey is suspicious of Geppetto as he's their creator. This is what he refers to as the puppet frenzy, the ongoing crisis where the puppets have violently turned against humans. A big part of the game is figuring out how the puppet frenzy started and how they were able to override the Grand Covenant. Finally, this fight also introduces the Stalkers, skilled humans that operated as mercenaries in Krat. Stalkers is a generic umbrella term for the group as there are 2 branches, the Sweepers and then the Bastards. Historically, each served different clientele and didn't like each other much. However, by the events of the base game, the distinction between the sub-factions doesn't really matter. Many of the Stalkers have already been killed by the puppet frenzy and its surrounding chaos. The remaining individuals now mostly operate out of self-interest. The most defining characteristic of Stalkers are their animal masks, which is a clever way of representing the many different animals in the original Adventures of Pinocchio books. Specific Stalkers like the fox, cat, and black rabbits are given larger roles in the narrative to match their animal counterparts in the original story, but by and large the group serves as optional boss fights. While they do offer a different style of combat encounter than the puppets or zombie carcasses that we'll soon meet, most don't provide much better of a fight than the Mad Donkey here. After being rescued, Geppetto returns to Hotel Krat, but not before giving P a new task, to clear the frenzied puppets out of the nearby City Hall building. He also rewards the assembly tool. This tool is a core part of Liza P's customization, allowing you to deconstruct and reconstruct non-special weapons by mixing and matching different blades and handles. This system allows for incredible flexibility and encourages player creativity. The handle determines the weapon's moveset, how it swings or what its heavy attack is like, for example, whereas the blade changes the overall stats and the attack power. This customization is intentionally introduced here because we're approaching the game's first true skill check. After the Parade Master and the Mad Donkey, players will likely have an inflated sense of confidence. The upcoming boss, the Scrapped Watchman, will change that. By introducing the customization now, it's presenting it as something you should tinker with in between attempts fighting the boss. As I've said, the Scrapped Watchman is Liza P's real first boss and was very difficult as a newcomer. As a brief side note, there's a phenomena I experienced with many of the bosses in Liza P, that my first attempt would be pretty good. I'd successfully recognize patterns, parry attacks, and often get the boss down to around half their health before dying. With Romeo, for example, I somehow got him down to just a third of his health in his second phase on my first attempt. What would then happen is I would die, and in follow-up attempts would be wildly unsuccessful and often really struggle. I couldn't get back into the same rhythm, and I'm really curious if other people have had a similar experience with Liza P or other Souls-likes. My personal rule became I would attempt bosses around 15 times. If I felt like I was making progress, meaning subjectively I still felt motivated, could see myself doing better, and most importantly was still having fun, I would continue. If after the 15th attempt I felt like I wasn't making progress, I would use the game's system of summoning an NPC Spectre to help me with the fight. Sometimes after an attempt or two with the Spectre, I'd feel that motivation again and would attempt the fight solo. I think this system, as well as the added-in difficulty options, are great additions to help people like me who are primarily interested in Lies of P's story. Again, this is what I think makes Lies of P special and separates it from other Souls-likes. Its story is not only a good one, but also a core part of the experience. With The Watchmen, its difficulty, in my opinion, came from its relative speed, long reach, and all-out aggression compared to anything else we've fought up to this point. Once you deplete its health to about the halfway mark, it becomes augmented with electricity and adds in an area of effect electric burst attack. All this is to say that it's a challenging but fair fight, in my opinion, with just one exception: its unblockable grab move. Many of the game's bosses have a move like this, where you just sit there and watch them throw you around doing damage. I understand the intent is to dodge these attacks, and I did learn, but from an engaging gameplay standpoint, it's surprising to me that these kind of attacks made it into the game, not to mention for every single boss. Visually, The Watchmen has a great design. A lore document in the entrance area of City Hall explains the original purpose of this puppet. It was made to welcome citizens and apprehend criminals around City Hall. After an incident with its battery becoming overcharged and creating an explosion, Krat's city council wanted to get rid of the puppet. A legal battle started over this, but in the meantime the puppet sat abandoned behind City Hall, hence the name Scrapped Watchman. Now, returning to Hotel Krat and Geppetto, we get our last big tutorial, the P organ, that despite what the name might suggest is referring to P's unique mechanical heart. It's a major character progression and customization system within the game, a long and multi-layered skill tree. It's also separate from the standard leveling where you use Ergo to increase stats. The P organ instead gives you entirely new capabilities, passive abilities, and general quality of life improvements. It uses a special resource called quartz and is divided into several phases. What you're seeing on screen right now is the overview of these different phases, each with unlockable abilities. I don't want to detail every upgrade ability, but I am going to explain the first one so the system can be clearly understood. With Phase 1, there are 4 options to choose from: an additional segment for the Fable meter, the ability to add a second dodge, increasing how long enemies are staggered for, and finally adding an additional healing charge. If you're looking at the screen, you see each of these options have 2 empty slots on them, making it seem like you simply spend your quartz to unlock. This is correct, but not the full picture. Think of each P organ phase as a group of 4 small skill trees. To unlock the main abilities of a phase, you first need to spend quartz in that phase's subtrees, which include abilities like enhancing specific attack damage, to lowering damage while dodging, to increasing the amount of ergo dropped by enemies. You could think of these as bonuses to that main phase ability, bonuses that even on their own feel impactful and make every quartz feel important. I thought the P organ was just a great gameplay mechanic, so it was quite surprising to later learn that it's also deeply tied into the story. Now, similar to how the Scrapped Watchman raised the bar on what to expect from bosses, the next few chapters do the same for the story. After returning from City Hall, Geppetto tasks P with locating and rescuing his business partner, Lorenzini Venigni, from his puppet factory.
Venigni Works is the puppet's main base. It's a factory where they manufacture more of themselves. Venigni himself went to stop them, but I'm worried. He's an industrialist, not a fighter. Rescue Venigni and shut down his factory. That will deny the puppets their reinforcements.
Venigni is Krat's version of Bruce Wayne, a rich philanthropist and inventor whose parents were murdered in front of him when he was a child, leading to him being raised by his butler. The big difference here is that the murderer was a puppet. It's Venigni who helps Geppetto create the Grand Covenant, programming rules into every puppet so that what happened to him could never happen to anyone else. There are many narrative threads in Lies of P, but the central question that drives most of the game is what or who caused the puppet frenzy. Given his background and role in creating the Grand Covenant, Venigni becomes one of the main forces driving the game's narrative. He's a great, multi-layered character who initially seems like just an arrogant playboy, but is shown to be much deeper.
Of course you're curious. Pulcinella has been restored thanks to you. In a small way. Mostly it was me, but, you know, genius never rests. Except for beauty rest. Pulcinella isn't just my butler. He's my family. The only one I have left, really. I won't forget what you've done for us. If you ever need anything or find yourself in a spot of trouble, call on your friend Venigni.
Venigni Works is the game's third main area, and it's a large multi-story factory that serves as the central hub for puppet production. From a gameplay standpoint, the area supports a more complex and vertical level design. The simple warehouse you start in eventually leads to factory floors, overhead walkways, a boiler room, and an optional poisonous canal. There's a great moment towards the end of the level where you lower a giant red pipe that's been suspended in the air, taunting you as you've worked through the factory, and this then creates a shortcut back to the beginning warehouse and Stargazer. For the enemy variety, let's start with the giant lumbering puppet with wrecking balls for hands that paces the length of the canal at the center of the factory. Titled the Puppet of the Future, it's quite intimidating given its size, but its slow, predictable attacks make for an easy if somewhat tedious fight. Other standouts include a puppet with shields for hands and a furnace-based one wielding a shovel and fire attacks. The latter teaches that fire damage can build a status effect called Overheat, which causes fire damage to linger, which is important to know for the boss of the factory. Finally, the level also has these vanilla model of puppets that have slower timing for their movements and attacks. These models are also often used as environmental surprises as they drop from conveyor belts above or move from piles on the ground. There's an optional mini-boss in the level in the form of another stalker, this one called the Survivor Mouse. He's a pretty easy fight, and I would guess it's here to maybe reinforce that you can dodge around an enemy to perform a backstab during a fight. The main boss of the level is titled the King's Flame, Fuoco. This is the puppet that originally ran the factory's furnace for Venigni, but is now producing puppets for the King of Puppets. I found this fight to be just okay. He's a boss I struggled with for a while on my first playthrough, despite his attacks having large wind-ups that seemed easy to read. I say he's just okay because at about half health, he gains several moves that involve him sliding around, launching oil and fireballs at you that personally I don't think add to the fun of the fight. Narratively, there's something interesting that's revealed during this fight. Earlier in the level, Venigni comments that Fuoco and the King of Puppets seem to be building an army of puppets and are marching them to the St. Frangelico Cathedral, presumably to kill the humans hiding out there. This is what leads us there next, to try and save them. Now, Fuoco talks to P in the middle of the fight. Initially, the text looks like gibberish, and it kind of is, so I didn't give it much thought. However, in New Game Plus, it becomes translated due to a decoder item that you get later in the game, and that gets carried over into New Game Plus. With this, we actually learn that Fuoco asks P to join their purge, and comments that they, the puppets, are fighting for the humans. At the Cathedral in New Game Plus, we can see that the puppets were actually going there to protect the humans from the zombie carcass enemies, which is why we'll see puppets fighting the carcasses outside of the Cathedral. It's our first sign that the puppet frenzy isn't actually what it appears to be. After the boss fight, you find Venigni's puppet butler, Pulcinella, and return to Hotel Krat. Now, before moving on, I want to return to Venigni Works briefly to discuss two important side interactions that occur there. First, we receive our first payphone call from the King of Riddles, Arlecchino.
Now, only the living solve riddles, as everyone knows. That's a must. When your city is so full of puppets, it seems are about fit to bust. It's time for the riddle. No more waiting. We thank you for participating. By morning, it walks on feet numbering 4. At midday, just 2. No less and no more. It walks on 3 feet when the evening arrives. And if you solve this, then I'll know you're alive.
There are 5 of these throughout the game, none of them difficult, and each reward a key that opens special doors with gear inside. These calls function as side quests, and they can stay as just a fun extra if that's all you want. However, if you follow it all the way to the end, this seemingly unrelated side quest connects to main characters in both the base game as well as the Overture expansion. Now, second, the factory introduces a pair of friendly stalkers, Red Fox and Black Cat. You run into these two throughout the game, and each time they scam or lie to you. Here, Black Cat pressures you into buying a valuable copy of a Krat City guidebook, only for it to be revealed to be a fake if you actually read the collectible. Later in the Malum District, they ask to work together to defeat the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, but then insult you behind your back.
What do you think? Not bad, eh? How are you, dumbass?
Adding insult to injury, they just use you as a distraction so they can loot the district. After the Grand Exhibition chapter, you can run into them again where they beg for a healing gold coin fruit to quote-unquote help with a disease that's making Black Cat go blind. I like these two a lot and originally just thought they were funny side characters. In the original Pinocchio stories, the fox and cat con Pinocchio out of gold coins by convincing him to bury the gold in a field so a gold coin fruit-producing tree will grow. Pinocchio does it, but the fox and cat come back later and steal the coins. Liza P does a great job adapting a version of these events, but then further develops the idea by tying these scammers into the main narrative near the end of the game. Before getting into Chapter 4, it's time to explain Ergo and the petrification disease. Going back to the game's opening credits, a group of outsiders known as the Alchemists arrive at Krat, which is then a much smaller and rural fishing community. Beneath the city, the organization discovers an Ergo mine and begins researching its almost magical power. Geppetto is later invited to conduct research on the substance himself and invents a method of using Ergo as the power source for his puppets, hence why when you destroy them, you receive Ergo. This advancement transforms the community and brings Krat into that supposed golden age we see in the opening credits. The alchemists continue to develop and incorporate Ergo into daily life, but are hiding two things from the general public. First, while studying the substance, the alchemists become aware that prolonged exposure to Ergo causes a disease they name the petrification disease. An infected person's blood will become blue in color, and stone scales slowly form all over their body until they eventually die from petrification. Second, the alchemists learn that Ergo is the crystallized life essence of a person that is created when they die from the petrification disease. This creates a cycle. By incorporating Ergo into all parts of life, the alchemists know that citizens will become overexposed and develop the petrification disease, which will then kill them and create Ergo, which creates further oversaturation and more petrification disease. The natural follow-up question to all of this is, why are the alchemists doing this? And the answer is that they believe by utilizing Ergo, they can bring about the next stage in evolution for humans. We don't learn this for several more chapters, so I'll circle back to it then. Chapter 4 introduces Lies of P's second enemy class, the Carcasses, whose origins tie into the petrification disease. From documents found before and within Venigni's factory, we learn that a doctor named Clark Shore developed a supposed cure for the disease based upon documents he stole from the alchemists. Marketing it as a miracle cure, he successfully sold his elixir around the city, unaware that the cure he stole was actually a serum designed by the alchemists to intentionally force mutations upon those who were infected, leading to the Carcasses. I like this. It changes the narrative from a simple puppet uprising to a more interesting and sinister conspiracy. The puppets are no longer the primary villains, rather it's the alchemists, who are using the citizens of the city as test subjects. For the Carcasses themselves, their visual design is excellent. It was always exciting, but also a bit scary seeing new and increasingly grotesque forms. Within combat, Carcasses feel different to fight than the puppets, with faster and more erratic movements, but less complicated attack patterns. Puppets are weak to electricity, whereas Carcasses are weak to fire. Narratively, the mutation explanation perfectly explains why there can be so many variants of them, similar to how the different puppet models are because of the different jobs they were designed for. Lies of P excels with its enemy variety. Moving forward, the chapters loosely alternate between puppet and Carcasses, with new variants being added each level, sometimes exclusively for that level. It's really quite impressive how many enemies will be one-offs that are introduced for an area and then never seen again or used sparingly. The Juggler and Centurion puppets come to mind. The great enemy variety only continues to grow as the game progresses, eventually with hybrids as the Carcasses begin possessing puppets, as well as once the human alchemists themselves begin appearing. Now, Chapter 4 is made up of two locations, Moonlight Town and St. Frangelico's Cathedral. Moonlight Town doesn't offer much different in terms of gameplay or level design, as you're still exclusively fighting puppets here. Visually, the area replaces the city environments with a quiet yet creepy ruined village that reminded me of Resident Evil 4's village. The section ends with an optional fight against another unremarkable stalker, and then riding the cable car up towards the cathedral. Frangelico's Cathedral sees you descending into the underbelly of the grand building in order to find the refugees and the Archbishop. If it's not immediately obvious from all of the Carcasses, we'll learn that almost all have mutated, including the Archbishop, who serves as the area's main boss. A document found later in the level explains how a nun under the Archbishop stole an artifact from the alchemists, and another states that soon after that the alchemists came to the cathedral in order to get the item back, under the guise of bringing a cure for the petrification disease. The level is frustrating in a really interesting and good way, in my opinion. It introduces and is mechanically built around a status effect called Decay, which once applied lowers both P's health as well as begins slowly decreasing your weapon's durability. It can be a particularly frustrating status effect, second only to Shock, especially because mini-bosses in the game can inflict it. Second, the cathedral has intricate multi-leveled spaces that can be punishing to navigate and seem set up to be, and I hate this word, but rage baity. Again, I want to remind that I said this is good. The first large room that you come across must be scaled, and to do that you'll be climbing ladders, walking along what are essentially 2x4 planks, and timing movement or jumps to squeeze past spinning gears. all while dodging enemies that are perfectly placed to hit you with projectiles and knock you down to the ground floor to start over, if you don't die from the fall, that is. I really enjoyed this, and the area rewards observing your surroundings too, as there are also several tucked away ledges that can only be accessed by falling onto them from above. This rage-baity quality applies to the level's boss as well. Fallen Archbishop is the game's first boss that has 2 health bars officially. The Parade Master, Scrapped Watchman, and Fuoco all have just 1, and once it was about half drained, they entered a second phase. Because of this pattern, I expected the same here, and was surprised seeing how quickly I was taking down the boss's health. I foolishly thought I was becoming good at the game. Instead, after draining the first health bar, we get a short cutscene that reveals the boss's second phase, complete with a full second health bar. I actually like this idea, although the execution isn't as good as it could have been because of the design of the boss. It effectively has 2 heads, the round mutant face that you fought during the first phase, and now the angel centipede one. Whichever side you focus on will be the one that engages you, so outside of seeing its moves for the sake of it, there's no reason to fight the angel side during the second phase. You've already learned most of the mutant ass's moves, and while it has a few new ones, it's still the easier fight. A true phase transition should force you to engage with a new challenge. The Archbishop's design fails to do this. Now, a final note about the St. Frangelico Cathedral is that it introduces 2 more significant side characters. First is the stalker Alidoro the Hound, named after the Mastiff dog from the original story.
Sure I don't need to introduce myself? Note these golden wings? Yes, you guessed it. You don't know who I am. Preposterous! Everyone in Krat has heard of me. Do you live under a rock? I'm Alidoro the Hound, treasure hunter extraordinaire.
He serves as the game's special weapon vendor, offering to trade you unique weapons and amulets in exchange for the Ergo you collect from boss fights. Similar to the fox and cat stalkers, Alidoro initially appears to just be a funny side character, but actually has a role to play in the main narrative as well as Eugenie's backstory. The other character at the cathedral is this guy.
My name is Janjo. I'm an pharmacist. Yes, pharmacist. I'm looking for the legendary gold coin fruit. I was able to use medicine to slow the infection spread. I have the petrification disease and I need a cure. Sorry, I ramble when I'm nervous.
Gianjo claims to be a pharmacist, but is actually an alchemist, a peaceful one who's looking for a gold coin tree to help with the petrification disease. He's not super important right now, so let's circle back to him later in the video. The next chapter takes place in the old Malum District, located near the cathedral. P is sent to check on the remaining residents there and unsurprisingly finds most have become carcasses. I don't have much to say about the level itself as it's fairly forgettable for me. Similar to Moonlight Town, it reminds me a lot of the village from Resident Evil 4, especially the town center with the pyre going, yet level-wise it doesn't do anything to really stand out. We do see further evolutions of the carcass enemy type, including infected bear variants and a carcass enemy wielding an axe-like weapon, however neither present much of a challenge. Having said how simple the level is, I do want to spend time on the chapter's boss, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. Visually, the design of the group is excellent. They're based on the rabbit undertakers briefly seen in the original story that scare Pinocchio into taking his medicine when he's sick. I like how leading up to the fight you can see them in person and hear them over the district sound system taunting you. It effectively builds them up as a unified threat, which is then reinforced by their fight. The core opponent is the eldest of the siblings. He is always involved in the fight and wields a giant greatsword. After he sustains enough damage, one of the siblings will join the fight, making it a 2-on-1 until you deal enough damage to the sibling and cause them to retreat. This is then repeated for each sibling. I like this because they all use a different weapon and have a different fighting style. First, the sister joins with her dual swords, then the tall one wielding a spear, and finally the last one uses a sword and hookshot. During the fight, if a sibling is present, they become the aggressive enemy, and the eldest becomes passive, meaning he just slowly walks towards you, but typically only attacks if close enough. In this way, it allows you to focus on dealing damage to the added second member to force their retreat. This is something that didn't click for me on that first playthrough. The fight was insanely difficult and I hated it. Upon reflection and understanding how to more successfully play the fight, however, I'm now neutral to even slightly positive on it. Having said that, it still perfectly illustrates a combat mechanic that I don't find enjoyable in Souls-likes or games in general, and that's enemy tracking. Here's an example on screen. The eldest sibling winds up, and I put incredible distance between us, yet he somehow still manages to hit me. Here's another example. The spear rabbit stabs at me twice, which I dodge, and then on his third, tracks me. Listen, I understand that this is part of Souls-like combat. You are meant to learn timings and need to dodge at the right time in order to be in the invincible part of the dodge animation. It's supposed to be difficult and require skill. I get that, or some version of it. Please don't comment trying to explain it to me. What I'm saying is that me personally, don't particularly enjoy this kind of combat mechanic. It only feels frustrating and like the game can only hit me by cheating. The fight ends with you killing the eldest of the Brotherhood, but the 3 younger siblings vanish with his body. There's an ominous moment where the hookshot rabbit stares at you before picking up his now dead brother's sword. This made me expect that I'd see them again and that he'd likely be wielding the greatsword. I ended up being right about half of this. They do return later for another fight, one that I surprisingly like better. However, the hookshot rabbit isn't the one wielding the sword. Before returning to Hotel Krat, you search the gang's hideout and find a portrait of yourself, or rather someone who looks like you.
Hey, check this out. Looks like you, sorta. From a certain angle. You know, if you squint. No, I'm just kidding. No, it looks exactly like you. I mean, you see it, right? With the nose and the... right?
You find a hidden path from the Brotherhood's hideout to the hotel and discover a large glowing tree. This is the gold coin fruit tree, and it introduces another new mechanic as well as new currency. The tree produces a single gold coin fruit every 10 minutes of real time, making them unlimited but time dependent. While this is an interesting idea, there's a lack of meaningful uses for the gold coins. They are primarily used to buy wish stones from the alchemist Giangio that augment the specter you can summon for boss fights. Unfortunately, their cost isn't balanced against their production. I used the Spectre mechanic for several bosses, yet for the majority of the game still had the maximum 99 gold coins. On the surface, this doesn't seem like a problem. Because they're tied to this mechanic, you can essentially ignore or farm them according to your own needs. However, my problem is that later in the narrative, you'll need gold coin fruit in order to avoid fights or to progress certain side quests. The best example of this is the final encounters with Black Cat and Red Fox, who you will be forced to fight and kill if you don't have any gold coin fruit on you. I don't like this, but not for the reason you might think. I actually think this is a great idea, but it doesn't get to be impactful because of how plentiful the gold coins actually are. If they were limited and more valuable, it would make giving one of them to these 2 bozos more of a decision rather than an afterthought. This whole mechanic ends up being one of Liza P's rare misses for me.
The King of Puppets' lair is on Rosa Isabelle Street. Perhaps the puppet frenzy will come to an end if we can take down their king.
Rosa Isabelle Street is similar to the first couple levels in that it's more puppet-filled city streets. There is one mini-boss, the White Lady Stalker, and then one elite enemy in the form of the clown puppet. Let's start with the Stalker. She has a cool intro with various puppets impaled on spikes around her performance stage. However, the actual fight felt easy. I was able to beat her on my first try using only a single healing charge. She can parry your attacks, but can also have many of her attacks interrupted, so it feels like these counterbalance each other. Or maybe I just got lucky on my first playthrough. This is one of the few fights I actually found to be more difficult on New Game Plus. Now in contrast, the Mad Clown Puppet was more difficult for me than some of the game's real bosses. The lead up to the fight is excellent, with the flaming mass of puppet limbs rolling down the street towards you, and then seeing the big clown bastard slowly following it. As I stated, this fight was very difficult for me. After many failed attempts, I just ran past him and learned there was a Stargazer checkpoint immediately after this. This was helpful because it avoided the long walk back to him, but it also presented an option. After activating the Stargazer, you can skip the clown puppet fight if you want because you'll respawn behind him. I didn't do this though, I wanted to beat him. After many attempts and trying many different strategies, like sniping him with the Falcon Eye Legion arm, I was finally able to beat him. I got better at recognizing the clown's attacks and slightly better at parrying them, triggering multiple stagger attacks for my eventual success. This is important because this isn't the story of me persevering until I beat him. It's the story of me realizing that I don't really get satisfaction out of beating a hard boss. That piece of enjoyment generally isn't there for me. After beating the clown, I didn't feel excited, I felt annoyed. Like the true enjoyment I was getting from the game, the world, atmosphere, lore, and story were being interrupted by something unnecessarily difficult. After the clown, you enter the opera house. Right away, it introduces a new enemy type with singing spider puppets. They inflict a status effect called Disruption through their opera singing, which, if built up, immediately kills you. They can also use puppet strings to connect to other enemies, allowing them to inflict disruption as well. These puppets only appear here in the Opera House, which is great for unique enemy encounters, but also just makes sense from a world-building perspective. They were probably used as stagehands during performances, using their spider-like string to control performers. The Opera House as a level is small when compared to Venigni Works or the Cathedral, but it's a welcome change. This now brings us to the main boss, the King of Puppets, which is both a good fight and important to the narrative. Starting with the fight, it has two phases. The first against a hulking armored machine, and then second against the more humanoid puppet Romeo that was inside. The first phase is much slower. Its attacks consist of slamming its fists, sweeping its arms, and just generally lumbering around. As you chip away its health, the King of Puppets introduces new attacks such as explosive projectiles and an area of effect tornado attack utilizing the fan on its back. There's really nothing too difficult here, and I don't think I ever died during this phase of the fight. Upon defeating the giant machine, it collapses and the much smaller puppet Romeo emerges wielding a scythe. Despite being difficult and despite Romeo's attack combos being long and becoming longer in his second phase, yes, Romeo himself has a second phase despite being a second phase, I enjoyed this fight. After killing him, you make your way backstage and oddly find Geppetto waiting for you, something he has never done before. He initially appears concerned for P's safety, but with the knowledge of how the story ends and the ability to understand the puppets in New Game Plus, his concern is actually a clever misdirection. In reality, Geppetto isn't worried that Romeo would kill P, rather that he would turn P against him. And this concern is founded. Romeo is actually trying to warn you about Geppetto and is attempting to join forces. Before the fight begins, we see this presentation. A puppet Geppetto taking the heart of a puppet that looks like P and placing it into a different body. Of course, we won't understand the significance of this on a first playthrough, or at least I didn't. The meaning and imagery of his performance didn't even register with me until the end of the game. Now, as Romeo dies, he calls P Carlo and gives him a necklace from the Monad Charity House, a place that took in orphans and raised them to be alchemists, doctors, or technicians. P feels something from all of this, but it's unclear what or why. Outside the Opera House, Geppetto instructs you to visit the site of the Grand Exhibition, which prior to the petrification disease and puppet frenzy was set to host a showcase on Krat's future puppet technology. Geppetto has heard that the alchemists there have supposedly developed a cure for the petrification disease. Now, in the area immediately after the Opera House, we see the ramifications of killing Romeo. All of the nearby puppets are in mourning over his death.
With their king dead, they seem lost. Then again, maybe they're mourning him? Whatever's happening. It's like they can't tell their elbow joints from their tail sockets. I'm not even sure they can function without the king to guide them.
This was a nice detail, but also serves the narrative. Without Romeo's guidance, the puppets are more or less directionless, meaning their offensive against the carcasses is unorganized, which in turn allows the mutant creatures to get a foothold in Krat City proper. We see this directly at Lorenzini Arcade, a shopping center that P must cut through in order to reach the Grand Exhibition Hall. I like the arcade for two reasons. First, because it has a great layout. The area is a shopping center with a stargazer at its center. Everything you do serves reaching the barred exit on the other side, but the level has you winding around the shopping center, unlocking gates and opening doors of businesses in order to create shortcuts back to that central stargazer. Now, second, the arcade has a great atmosphere and successfully conveys the escalation of the carcass infestation. We see numerous new forms of the mutation, like these fat ones that have pincer-like spikes extending from their hands, or these large yet slow-moving bruisers. There are acid-filled sacs hanging from sections of the ceiling, and an acidic, spore-filled basement that begins slowly poisoning you as you move through it. These all create a looming sense of dread that the infection is spreading, which we'll further see a few chapters from now. After exiting the arcade, we arrive at the Grand Exhibition. From a level design perspective, I also really like this area. Visually, it's not quite as distinct as Venigni Works or the Opera House, but the various puppet displays make for an interesting environment, and I like the multi-storied layout of the building. For enemies outside the exhibition, there are two large Centurion puppets wielding electric maces. Their lanky baboon arms give them a large attack range, and this was another enemy type that gave me a lot of trouble on my first playthrough. They're optional fights, but similar to with the clown puppet, I wanted to beat them, even if I had to resort to the mildly embarrassing strategy of trying to get them stuck on the environment. Additionally, the level reuses a mini-boss from earlier, the shield-armed puppet, in a hilarious encounter, but probably also a frustrating one for many people. It sits in your way on a narrow third-story rafter with no obvious way of dealing with it. Even baiting it to chase you doesn't particularly help much because the entire area is narrow. If you get knocked off the beams, you die from the drop distance, and making it worse, further past the shield guy are puppets that attempt to knock you off by throwing explosives at you. This ended up being an easy encounter for me because I had the electric burst Legion arm equipped, meaning I could damage the first puppet through its shields, and then the ranged puppets weren't a big deal. On New Game Plus, I did deliberately try it without that Legion arm just to see, and while Shields was more frustrating, I still found it to be enjoyable. Now, additionally, the Grand Exhibition also introduces us to the alchemist enemies. The first two we meet are a simple machine gunner and sword user, both easy to deal with. Then it steps on the gas a bit with this boxer guy. This fight also isn't particularly difficult because it's meant to demonstrate the style of moves that the upcoming boss will have. Despite that though, it is a fun fight that stands out in my memory. This chapter's boss is a massive Frankenstein-esque human named Champion Victor. He was a strongman performer who was beloved by the city, but who became deathly ill. Before dying, Victor struck a deal with the alchemists, saying that if they could bring him back to life after he dies, as well as bring back his strength, he would serve them. So the organization did exactly that, leading to Victor becoming an important test subject in the organization's Ergo experiments. Champion Victor is my second favorite boss fight in the base game because it feels difficult but entirely manageable to learn. There's no major mechanical trick to his moveset, just well-telegraphed punches, charges, and swipes. Because of this, it's one of the only bosses that I truly enjoyed in the classic Souls-like sense of patiently learning a difficult moveset. At around half health, he juices up like Bane from Batman and begins glowing blue with Ergo. This adds a couple new attacks to his moveset, but largely just makes him faster. It builds effectively on the first stage by having many of the same telegraphs, but now requiring you to recognize and react to them quicker. I also like this boss because it feels particularly designed for dodging rather than parrying, which I always preferred. After defeating Victor, we are introduced to Simon Manas, the leader of the alchemists and former colleague of Geppetto. He explains the work the alchemists are doing with Ergo, invites Pete to join the Order on their research island, and then quickly disappears. Simon Manas is one of the game's two main antagonists. His past actions get expanded on in lore documents, and Sophia hypes up how awful he is, but based strictly on what we see, I found him less interesting than the alchemist organization itself. Having said that, I think that's ultimately the point. Simon as a villain is this larger-than-life classic mustache-twirling bad guy, and he serves as smoke and mirrors for the other villain, who you've probably guessed by now is Geppetto, and who is a much more interesting and personal villain. From here, getting to the Alchemist Isle and confronting Simon Manas becomes the main objective going forward. Venigni knows of a vehicle that can get us there, but powering it requires a special golden Ergo. This leads us out of the city and into the Barren Swamps, an area historically used as a dumping site for scrapped and broken puppets. Perhaps I missed it, but I don't believe it's ever explained why this special Ergo can only be found in this dumping site. I assumed it had something to do with the large amounts of residual Ergo from the discarded puppets maybe accumulating and turning into the gold variant, but that's just speculation on my part. Narratively, it doesn't really matter, however, because the swamps serve a different narrative purpose, which I'll get into in the next chapter. Before starting on that area, though, I want to discuss some of the characters at Hotel Krat. I've held off talking about their personal storylines until now so that they could be discussed in their entirety. Let's start with Antonia and her puppet butler Polendina. Antonia is slowly succumbing to the petrification disease. You can see the grayscales beginning to form on the side of her face, and now with the conclusion that the alchemists are not developing a cure, her death appears to be imminent. She appears to have accepted her fate as seen through her reflecting on her past.
I was so feisty, so fearless back then. I loved the world. The world loved me back. The passion of those days is long gone, but I still dream of those memories. I'm curious what your young eyes see. Is there any resemblance between me and that portrait?
At the end of this conversation, you must choose between lying about her appearance in order to be kind, or being honest but hurtful. Now, in tandem with Antonia's story is the story of her butler Polendina, who has developed feelings of love for Antonia despite being a puppet.
I adore Lady Antonia. It is a presumptuous feeling for a puppet to have, to be sure. I have no intention of putting myself forward, of course. However, I cannot watch her die. It's too painful. Thus, I need your unique perspective. You exist somewhere between human and puppet. Can a puppet and a human fall in love? Have you ever met a puppet who loves a human?
This occurs because Polendina has developed an awakened ego. Using real-world language, think of this like AI gaining consciousness. It's a rare thing to happen, and from what I can gather, there are two possible ways it can occur. The first is when a puppet awakens specifically to the human's ergo that is powering them. The puppet essentially becomes a continuation of that person, gaining the person's memories, personality, and characteristics. According to a document in the expansion, this can only happen if a puppet closely resembles the individual whose ergo is within them. An in-game example would be Romeo, who clearly remembers his past life as a human and the relationships he had. Now, the second way of awakening is when the puppet itself simply gains consciousness, unrelated to whose ergo is powering them. This is what Polendina is experiencing from what I can gather. He isn't remembering a past life and love for Antonia, but rather developed these feelings for himself. Polendina's feelings for Antonia ultimately lead him to asking P to find a cure. In turn, this leads P to Giangio, that alchemist from the Cathedral. Giangio is able to develop a cure from a gold coin fruit, somewhat easily I might add, but it has a trade-off.
Sadly, it cannot cure everyone completely. Victims who have progressed too far have already lost organ function, and there's no way to restore that. Even if we eliminate the petrification disease, they won't last long. Their passing might be less painful than petrification, though. Are you sure? I can make a cure, Mr. Stalker, but I leave the choice to you. A longer but painful life, or a quicker but peaceful end.
After giving the cure to Polendina, he asks us to decide whether or not he should give the cure to Antonia, which I find to be a structural misstep because the narrative payoff of this storyline only works if Antonia is given the cure. I stated earlier that all of the major storylines in this game revolve around characters telling a significant lie. The lie here is twofold. With Antonia, if you give her the cure, she believes she is better and is granted peace in her final days. However, while the cure effectively heals the petrification disease, the damage has already been done and it speeds up her inevitable death. Her lie is the act of acceptance. She goes on as if she's cured, likely knowing deep down that's not the whole truth. Polendina's lie comes after Antonia's passing during the final chapter.
As for me, I am bereft of emotion. My life, or what passes for it, has lost meaning. It feels like pain has swallowed me whole. Thus I plan to erase my heart and become an ordinary puppet. This will be my last conversation with you as Polendina. Despite how it ended, I thank you for the kindness, bravery, and beautiful moments you showed me.
Having experienced the humanity of love and now grief, he states that he can't continue with it. He consciously chooses to turn off his emotions and revert back to simple programming. In effect, he lies to himself about who he really is, choosing that old programming over true consciousness. It's an incredibly well-written scene that might be my favorite in the game. It's impactful because Polendina eased Antonia's suffering at the cost of cutting his time with her short. If you tell him not to use the cure, he still ends up shutting off his emotions after Antonia's passing, but it feels less meaningful. Now, the second storyline I want to look at is between Eugenie the weapon specialist and Alidoro the treasure hunter. Early in the game, when Alidoro arrives at the hotel, Eugenie recognizes him as the stalker that saved her life when she was younger. After the grand exhibition, Alidoro leaves the hotel for the Barren Swamps, and Eugenie asks P to deliver a gift she made for him, a glove with only 4 fingers. In the swamps, when you locate and give him the gloves, you get this interaction.
What's this? A gift for a rescuer. From a technician girl. I don't remember. I've saved so many of the common people. Anyway, thank her, I suppose. Oh. Oh dear. These gloves are a mess. They don't even fit. Is this a practical joke? My God, I never did like that girl. She's just like him. Oh, never mind. I thought you had better taste than this. How disappointing. Get these rags out of my sight.
This could have easily just been a joke. Eugenie sees Alidoro as this legendary figure when in reality he's an egotistical jerk. This would have worked and been funny. However, this whole interaction is actually our first clue that Alidoro is lying and isn't actually who he says he is. Reporting back to Eugenie on the gloves, she asks you Alidoro's reaction, and you can either tell her the truth or lie to her. Regardless, you learn that Alidoro lost a finger rescuing her some time ago, and that's why she made him the 4-fingered glove, yet now he says the gloves don't fit. This suspicion gets further developed later in the swamps when we meet junior treasure hunter and Alidoro superfan, Hugo. He gives us a wanted poster which we can later confront Alidoro with.
Right, yeah. Let me explain. There is an unscrupulous reporter called Medoro, and he's the epitome of yellow journalism, and he only writes favorable articles if you bribe him. One time, I didn't give him a certain antique he wanted, and he slandered me, just like this. What has this world come to? Even noble explorers searching for true history get lambasted for all to see.
Despite his attempts to explain it here, we'll later learn the truth. In the game's penultimate chapter, several stalkers raid Hotel Krat at the alchemist's request. We find Alidoro in the tunnels beneath the hotel, and the individual reveals that he killed the real Alidoro and has been masquerading as him.
I had a feeling you would ask sooner or later. It's because of that girl, isn't it? I am not Alidoro the Hound. Not the real one, anyway. I used to be Alidoro's partner. I admired him, to be honest. He was amazing. Amazing at everything, except making a profit, that is. But he didn't need to cut me off just because I sold some antiques. I mean, what's a few antiques when you've got bills to pay? We argued. One thing led to another. I had to kill him. But stealing his identity was the logical next step. My original code name is Parrot, after all. Fitting, isn't it?
Players can choose to kill him or not, and by doing so they can learn that the real Alidoro is actually Eugenie's brother. We then choose whether to reveal this information to her or not. Again, similar to the story with Antonia and Polendina, there's no reason to not share this with Eugenie outside of lying for the sake of lying. It's one of the few instances in the game where I think the lying mechanic actually doesn't work with the broader story. The game's themes are about humanity and how lying is fundamentally human. However, here it seems like the more human thing would be to tell Eugenie the truth. Up to this point, and largely after it as well, lying is often the more empathetic and human choice. This demonstrates that lying can be good, and that it takes a human to be able to know the difference. Returning to Eugenie and Alidoro, this is one of the best reveals in the game. Alidoro, as we've known him, is a lie. This concept is then able to be further capitalized on in the expansion, where we meet the real Alidoro, and he's every bit the legendary and noble stalker Eugenie paints him as.
I'm just someone fighting against the alchemists. I have my reasons. but I must hide my identity to protect the person most dear to me.
Interestingly, the real Alidoro is also a liar himself. His identity is not revealed to his sister until after his death, leaving her with unanswerable questions about his life and highlighting that their relationship itself was a lie. It's great writing that effectively uses the game's themes of lies and humanity. The Barren Swamp marks the beginning of the game's final act, and its purpose is primarily as a narrative time sink, to get P out of the city so that narrative events in the city can occur off-screen. You're looking for a MacGuffin, the golden Ergo, which gets no explanation other than that Venigni needs it. As a location and chapter, it's fine. Visually, the swamp shares similarities to the earlier rocky wildernesses, but now with literal mountains of puppet corpses on the horizon and around the level. It's an industrial wasteland, complete with polluted water that applies the health-draining status corruption if you're exposed for too long. The most interesting thing the level does with its environment are two areas featuring giant cannons atop towers that fire explosive rounds at you. For enemies, the level mostly relies on the standard puppets and carcasses, as well as several repeats of previously unique enemies. There's the return of the giant puppets of the future from Venigni Works, as well as the mad clown puppet from Rosa Isabelle Street. We get another stalker battle, this time against the Owl Doctor, but there's nothing unique about this fight. None of these encounters feel new, and this contributes to why the chapter is just fine rather than good, in my opinion. The one exception to this is the weird-ass cartoon-looking puppet you fight towards the end of the area. It has a great moveset that always felt off-kilter and hard to recognize with the way it bounces around. My only complaint is, of course, its grab-and-throw move. The chapter's boss is called the Green Monster of the Swamp and is loosely based on the Green Fisherman character from Adventures of Pinocchio, here a monster rather than a person. The original character was portrayed as having crazy seaweed-like hair atop his head, which translates to the boss's visual design with its tentacles. In the original story, Alidoro the Hound rescues Pinocchio from being eaten by the fisherman. While Alidoro is present in the Barren Swamp, he doesn't help during the fight, only appearing afterwards to claim some of the reward. Now, in regards to the fight, I don't enjoy it. The first phase is just the monster, and then for the second it scurries into the shell of a Watchman puppet that's in the arena. It's unclear if this is the same Watchman we beat at the City Hall, although I'd guess not. It seems unlikely given the state of Krat that any city municipal workers are currently working to dump puppet bodies. I'll say that this phase transition is a great way to augment and add to the boss's moveset. The swamp monster becomes even faster and more aggressive, but also now mimics attacks from the scrapped Watchman. Thematically, this also foreshadows what we'll see when we return to Krat, that the carcass mutation has begun taking control of puppet bodies and incorporating their movesets. My personal problem with the fight is that I think it's too difficult, crossing the line from hard into genuinely annoying. I want to be clear, this is not me saying that this boss should be changed, rather it's just me explaining why I don't like fighting this boss. Well, that's not entirely true. I think its grab attack should be changed. The fight embodies two things I find frustrating with the combat system: long attack combos and extreme aggression that when paired together make it feel like different attack combos are being chained together endlessly. The swamp monster in both phases is highly aggressive with many sweeping and slam attacks, but in the second phase its movement becomes even faster. It often bounds around the arena in between moves, making it feel like there's not a window to counterattack, and like the boss's name should have been Flowrider with how it made my head spin trying to keep it on screen. On top of this, many of its attacks inflict the status effect decay, which I have a love-hate relationship with. It's not as poorly implemented here as it is in, say, the DLC's fight with Lamacchio, and I think at its core I like decay as a debuff. It rapidly degrades your weapon's durability, which in turn shifts your priorities during combat, adding pressure to an encounter. This is good. However, in my opinion, pairing this debuff with a fast and highly aggressive boss feels like a lose-lose. This is, again, just my opinion. I think for some people this isn't going to be valid criticism, and that's okay. I'm not an expert on these types of games, and I'm not trying to be. I found using the flame grinder to augment my weapon with fire was a big help, as was the flamethrower Legion arm. Now, after defeating the monster, we obtain the golden Ergo and return to Krat through tunnels that connect back to the beginning central station. This chapter starts us back at the train station and streets we navigated through at the beginning of the game. However, they're differentiated here by new enemies. Without the puppet defensive line holding them back, carcasses have moved into the area in high numbers, and the puppets that do remain are themselves being parasitically used by the carcasses. Similar to the swamp monster, I really like this visual, the animatronic puppet bodies with blue and green tentacles flailing from their joints. The station is also expanded with areas that weren't accessible the first time around, and the decay debuff is used heavily throughout this entire area, with many sections blanketed in the acidic blue fog. There is one elite enemy and one mini-boss in the station, both of which I enjoyed. The elite enemy is an armored cat-scorpion carcass creature with an ass that could pull a bus. It has damage-reducing crystalline armor everywhere except that ass, and so it requires proper positioning in order to maximize damage. The mini-boss is another stalker fight, the robber weasel, which stands out to me because it offered a small but welcome change to the stalker fights. We fought the Mad Donkey early in the game's second chapter, but none of the stalker fights since, except for the White Lady, have felt any more difficult or unique. The Weasel elevates this at least a little, utilizing a jump attack, a longer axe combo, and throwing items to damage you from a distance. As I'm reading this back, these don't sound like much, but it's enough to make the fight feel different from the others. After making your way through the station, you're led out into the streets of Krat. The city is falling apart as large Ergo rock spires from beneath the city sprout up through buildings and streets. The alchemists are to blame for the destruction, and Sophia directs you to a collapsed workshop of theirs wherein you fight several new alchemist enemies and then a mini-boss called the Walker of Illusions. For me, this was a functional yet forgettable section and fight. I actually forgot about it completely when going through New Game Plus and then again when reviewing footage for this script. The narrative then shifts, requiring you to rush back to the hotel because of an attack, which makes this excursion to the Alchemist Workshop Tower feel trivialized. The Stargazers are disabled for the time being, forcing us to once again retread the same route we took at the beginning of the game. The chapter's boss is the reanimated carcass-infested body of the game's first boss, the Parade Master. I like the visual design of this boss a lot. The blue glowing tentacles growing out of the head cavity in particular look cool. In terms of difficulty, the Corrupted Parade Master is quite easy, and I say this because on my first playthrough, it's the only main chapter boss I beat on my first attempt. It uses many of the Parade Master's same moves, but now with faster movements and/or additional attacks added to a combo. For example, there's the Body Slam move. With the original Parade Master, this was a single move which left a large opening for player counterattacks afterwards. With the corrupted version, the Body Slam move is followed up by the boss writhing around. It successfully blends the original puppet moveset with the carcass style. While not incredibly difficult, this was an excellent gameplay experience, as it built upon and to a small degree corrupted the muscle memory and pattern recognition of that first boss. Overall, this chapter manages to reuse an area while also feeling mostly fresh and showing narrative escalation. My biggest criticism for it is that by this point, the city-themed levels, even if modified by new enemies and the ongoing calamity, are beginning to wear out their welcome. We continue to Hotel Krat but arrive after the attack. From a narrative standpoint, I like this. Hotel Krat had become quite comforting, so it getting attacked and vandalized felt personal. I wanted revenge, and the game smartly fuels this by unambiguously telling you the culprits. Sophia states that it was a group of stalkers, the Fox and Cat, Alidoro the Hound, and the remaining Black Rabbit Brotherhood, working under orders from Simon Manus. The stalkers have abducted Geppetto and are bringing him to the Alchemist Island. While the rabbits and even Alidoro to some extent weren't a big surprise, the Fox and Cat betraying me after everything I did for them pissed me off. Now, within the hotel, Sophia is the only person still in the main hall. Everyone else is barricaded in Geppetto's office. If you stop and think about that, it's a bit strange she isn't with them, and we'll return to that shortly. After rescuing everyone, Antonio reveals a secret passage to a small alchemist base located beneath the hotel. You work your way to an underground dock where the golden Ergo is used to power an alchemist submarine. A neat detail is that the vehicle looks like a shark, which serves as another callback to the Adventures of Pinocchio story. In the original source material, he's swallowed by a large dogfish shark rather than a whale, as seen in the Disney movie. I thought this was a clever way of adapting that part of the story. This area, called the Relic of Trismegistus, is fine, but short. From what I read online, data mining revealed the area originally featured a large alchemist facility, but that was cut at some point during development. Having said that, it appears like Round8 Studio was later able to use that cut content in the Overture expansion, because in it we use the same secret passage to travel to an underground alchemist facility. As it is, Relic of Trismegistus offers two things. First, the resolution to the Alidoro storyline with the reveal of his true identity, and second, the rematch against the Black Rabbit Brotherhood as the chapter's boss. I actually enjoyed this rematch much more than the first fight. The first phase pits you against the three remaining siblings all at the same time. Their combat flow still utilizes an aggro system where one of the siblings will be the primary attacker while the other two will provide support with occasional attacks. Throughout the fight, each will also augment their weapon with an element: decay, fire, and electricity. This initial phase is difficult but really works for me. I like it. The combat flow between the siblings feels natural, and it's rewarding having to determine where to put your focus. Do you shift to whoever is aggroed towards you, or do you stay focused on one sibling at a time, even if they're passive and another sibling is on your ass? My strategy was the latter, and it initially seemed set up this way. However, there's a twist. In the introduction cinematic for the fight, you see a chained-up coffin with a tank and tube attached. It shouldn't come as a surprise then when the eldest brother, whom you previously killed, bursts from the coffin reanimated. Narratively, it's clear this was the deal the Brotherhood made with the alchemists: assault the hotel, abduct Geppetto, and stop P in exchange for reviving their brother. The eldest joins the fight after you've killed any two of the siblings. Meaning, if you've been focusing on them one at a time, the second phase has the zombie eldest plus the remaining sibling. I like this because it changes the strategy, or at least it did for me. Focusing on one at a time no longer worked for me, and instead I started slowly whittling all of them down and then would quickly kill each of them in rapid succession, so the second phase with the eldest would just be a one-on-one. Now, having given this compliment, I actually think the second phase with the big rabbit is not fun, and it's again mainly because of its attack tracking. He's faster and stronger, which makes the tracking feel even more unfair, despite his sword actually being shorter. The only way I could reliably beat him was to get him stuck on these environmental sacks and then slowly chip away his health one attack at a time. Beating all four members of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood clears the path to the Shark Submarine and the base game's final chapter. However, before moving on, I want to return to Hotel Krat for important reveals that occur after this fight. The first is centered on Venigni's personal story.
I am an orphan. In fact, my parents were murdered before my very eyes. The authorities in Krat insisted it was a mugging, but I know what I saw. A mad, raving puppet killed them. A puppet that was driven by a murderous lunatic's awakened ego. I know that because the lunatic told me his name. Arlecchino. I'll never forget his insane laugh. I have been fitting puppets with the Grand Covenant to ensure no one else ever has to experience the same tragedy I did.
This finally circles back into a side quest I mentioned over an hour ago, the King of Riddles payphone calls. It turns out that these two characters, the puppet who murdered Venigni's parents and the King of Riddles, Arlecchino, are one and the same. If you complete all of the payphone riddles, Arlecchino can be located on the Alchemist Island, and this leads to a great interaction as well as information about Venigni. Arlecchino was a puppet that served an alchemist and who eventually gained consciousness. The expansion implies that this occurred via that first method. He was powered by the ergo of a murderer, and that personality is what awoke. However, this seems inconsistent with what Arlecchino himself says in the base game, that he learned his violence from his alchemist owner. He recognized that the characteristics he was developing, such as the ability to think or be angry, effectively made him human, yet real humans continue to treat puppets just as tools. In turn, he uses one of the most evil human acts, serial murder, to force recognition that puppets are capable of the worst human traits. This sounds more like a new consciousness than a reawakened personality, and what we see of Arlecchino in the expansion also feels consistent with this. Narratively and thematically, Arlecchino is the original sin for the human-puppet relationship. His killings are the direct catalyst for the creation of the Grand Covenant, because when he kills Venigni's parents, he sets their son on the path of making sure it can't happen again.
Of the many I have committed since, the Venignis, they have to be my personal favorites. They engineered the very first automated puppets. Enslaved puppets without even understanding what they'd done. I didn't go there to take revenge for what his parents did. I mainly just wanted to slaughter them because they were so damned happy. Oh, what a great memory. In their last moments, they begged me not to kill their child. So I didn't. I'm not a machine. I have free will. I made a choice in the heat of the moment. And it was a choice driven by that most human of emotions. Curiosity. If the child survived, would he be traumatized for life? Become a coward? A vengeful puppet-hating bigot? A despairing wretch? Would he fling himself into the sea? Would he remember the devil that orphaned him before his eyes was a puppet? Would he remember Arlecchino? Not surprisingly, the alchemists and people of the workshop were as artless as I expected, concealing the truth. Thanks to them, I get to see Venigni endure twice as much pain. I cannot control myself.
This interaction leads to uncovering Venigni's own lie.
We had just watched one of my favorite films, I remember. I begged them to make me the warrior from it. If I hadn't, would my parents still be alive? Would we have been untouched by that murderous puppet? I've always blamed myself. It's a hell of a burden for a child, that kind of guilt. So I hung on. I hung on to the Grand Covenant. I wanted to use it to keep people safe. You know, in many ways, I envy you. Your strength. Thank you for this. Talk about closure.
Might I have a moment, puppet of Geppetto? Ah, good.
I was a bit concerned my voice wouldn't even reach you. It has been so very long since I spoke out of turn. You see, I too have been awakened. I have an ego, as Master Venigni would say. And I have been this way for some time. At least since Master Lorenzini was a child. He had no one else, you see. His parents. I'm sure you've heard of their terrible fate. And he had to see it all. But Master Lorenzini is stronger than most people suspect. A puppet was the killer. We both knew it. But if we had told the authorities, they might have removed me from the household as well. The young master would have been alone if I had been taken away. If only I could have saved them. Now I atone for that failure by thinking only of Master Venigni's prosperity and happiness. But even I did not realize how deeply he still held that trauma. How badly that murderous puppet had scarred his soul. You have set him free. I cannot thank you enough.
While he presents himself as a carefree, eccentric genius, he's actually still carrying around his grief hidden away. Despite knowing that it was a puppet that killed his family, he was forced to accept and participate in the authorities' cover-up of the events. His entire life has largely been defined by a single traumatic event, yet he's been forced to lie about it. Venigni is also a bit of a hypocrite, as his actions with the Grand Covenant effectively deny puppets consciousness and autonomy. Yet he has a deep and meaningful connection with his own puppet, Pulcinella, who he treats as family. Although it's not clear to me if Venigni actually knows his butler is awakened. From the conversation I showed earlier, it almost feels like Pulcinella hasn't revealed it to him. Which is even more interesting in my opinion if that's the case. Venigni's story is excellently written, and I liked how Arlecchino gets further expanded upon in the Overture DLC. Now, in addition to Venigni's personal story, returning to the hotel finally provides an answer to who started the puppet frenzy. Earlier in the game, Venigni gives us a device that passively analyzes any puppets we fight. Through the data that's been collected, the inventor is able to determine that while the puppets were communicating and organizing, they were also still following the Grand Covenant. He plays part of a decoded communication, but admits that he still can't understand all of it.
The laws of the Grand Covenant bind us. We're his puppets. First law. All puppets must obey their creator's commands. Law 0. The creator's name is Geppetto. Giuseppe Geppetto.
Ah! Did you hear that? The last part sounded important, but there was too much static.
Here we learn that there is a secret Law 0 in the Grand Covenant that instructs the puppets to always follow Geppetto's orders. This implies that the puppets in Krat are not rampaging because they broke through the Grand Covenant, but rather because they're following a secret order from Geppetto, meaning it was he who started the puppet frenzy. This initially confused me because earlier we see many of the puppets following Romeo's orders to protect the humans, and in the full version of the decoded communication, we hear Romeo say as much.
I'm doing what I can to fend off both the petrification disease and the alchemists. My puppets and I are taking a stand against death itself. That's why I tried sending you messengers. But you got rid of them all. You're still an unstoppable fellow. I remember you. No reason for us to fight, I suppose.
This implied to me that the puppet frenzy was itself a lie, and that we just couldn't understand what the puppets were doing at the time. After playing the game again, what I think happens is that Geppetto does start the frenzy initially. However, when Romeo reawakens and is no longer bound to the Grand Covenant, he's able to specially communicate with all of the other puppets and counter the Law 0 programming. This is just my best guess, though. For me, I wish the writers had stuck with the twist that the puppets were actually trying to save the humans from the disease and monsters. The concept of the frenzy being a lie is more interesting to me than Geppetto just being more evil. Now, with these reveals discussed, let's continue on to the base game's final level. After taking the submarine to the Alchemist Isle, we are greeted on the beach by Sophia. Here we learn she's been sixth sensing us the entire game. She was never physically present at Hotel Krat and has instead been projecting an image of herself. This wasn't something I caught on my first playthrough, despite me now recognizing there were many obvious signs, like the fact she never interacts with anyone other than P, or her just appearing at the Grand Exhibition randomly. When the hotel was invaded, she is the only one not barricaded in Geppetto's room, which seemed odd that she'd be left out, but makes sense now. We learn that Sophia didn't bring P to life to save the city, but rather to save her. This is her lie. Sophia has the power to manipulate time through Ergo. It's why she's being held captive, and it provides an in-universe explanation for the game's death mechanic. It's her winding back the clock to before we died. Locating Sophia becomes another goal of the final chapter. From the beach, we work our way towards the looming structure on the horizon. The sense of scale that the level creates is something I really like about the level. Seeing the tower in the distance, to then actually arriving at its base, to then physically climbing up the entire damn thing was cool to experience as a continuous gameplay segment. It was neat to look down as I climbed higher and see the previous sections I had fought through. There's a cost to this though, which is that the level becomes a tedious slog after about 45 minutes, but we'll get to that. There's no combat for the initial part on the beach, and that's because there are short memories that play as you progress. These vignettes depict the story of a young boy, his abandonment at a boarding school by his father, his friendship with another young boy, an encounter with a famous stalker, and finally, the discovery of the boy's body by that same stalker. These memories directly tie into the true identity of P and the mysterious figure Carlo, whom we've heard name-dropped throughout the game. The island is drawing in massive amounts of Ergo from Krat and the surrounding area, creating a shimmering blue dust storm that's projecting the dead boy's past. This environment initially had me excited for what was in store. As I approached the first set of stairs and cannons began to fire on me and I witnessed a horde of carcasses, these feelings of excitement grew. The main castle portion of the level has an extremely vertical layout, often requiring you to climb scaffolds and narrow walkways over death falls, which I liked. Enemy placement is ruthless, often positioned to be frustrating or to potentially knock you off these high ledges to your death. I liked this too. The Abbey also has the base game's best boss and some great narrative moments. Despite all of this, however, the Arche Abbey is my least favorite area in the game because of how long it is and how many of its environments feel the same. The level feels designed to wear you down, and that was something I enjoyed for a period of time until I didn't anymore. The level overstays its welcome, which is something I feel conflicted saying given all of the previous things I enjoyed about it. I understand it's intentionally designed to be a gauntlet challenge, but it crosses from challenging to repetitive for me. You're mostly fighting the same enemies as before for 2 hours. The first boss of the area, the Door Guardian, isn't interesting. It's a big, imposing gatekeeper that doesn't have any mechanical depth. Even the final encounters with the fox and cat also feel anticlimactic, even though I liked both the characters. The stalkers admit they only helped abduct Geppetto out of their desire to get a cure for Cat and to leave the city. As I mentioned earlier, the game provides the player with an easy, low-cost way to skip the fights with these two entirely by using gold coin fruit, which I don't like. Giving up a single fruit is meaningless, and if you do choose to fight them, neither fight is interesting. After the complex multi-opponent battle with the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, returning to one-on-one stalker duels, and standard ones at that, is a step backwards. The game fails to deliver an emotional payoff with these two. For a great emotional payoff that the level does provide, there's locating Sophia. Sophia has been kept as a prisoner and experimented on by Sam and Manas. The Overture DLC gives more context to this as it takes place right around when Sophia was captured. We learn that Sophia is the daughter of the previous alchemist leader, Valentinus Monad. In the DLC, we learn that a rift formed within the Alchemist Order, leading to Simon, the then second-in-command, staging a coup, killing Valentinus, and taking control. Simon spared Sophia due to his romantic feelings for her, but imprisoned her when she refused to cooperate. Upon finding her, we see her physical form is deteriorated, and she asks P to kill her to grant her peace. You're once again given a choice, and by agreeing to end her suffering, she gives you her Ergo and passes. If you choose not to give her peace, she dies shortly after anyways. As with many of the other choices, there's no reason to disregard her request outside of just being a dick. However, unlike the other choices in the game, your decision here does change which ending you can get. Now for the level's boss fights, the main game finishes with a string of 3. I want to mention that I appreciate there being a stargazer between each of them. In another timeline, I could see this being a string of 3 bosses you have to beat back to back, reminiscent of older Japanese RPGs. The first boss is Lexasia the Complete, and this fight is perfect in my mind for many of the same reasons I like the Champion Victor fight. She has a large range of attacks, yet they simultaneously feel easily learnable. It was rewarding recognizing her pointing her sword was going to lead to a series of 3 lunges that could impale me, or that her upswings were actually a much longer combo chain than they initially appeared. Realizing that she does one last heavy damage attack to catch you off guard after you stagger her was annoying the first time, but something I liked afterwards. Similar to Champion Victor, her Phase 2 increases her speed and increases her lightning-based attacks, yet it still is highly readable. Perfect guarding her start of phase lightning bolts back at her was something I found incredibly satisfying. The DLC tries to replicate this with Arlecchino's second phase opening barrage, but it doesn't work as cleanly in my opinion. Narratively, Lexasia is the final protection for Simon, attempting to stop us from interrupting his plan. All around, I enjoyed this fight, and it's my favorite in the entire game, including the DLC. Now, Simon Manas is the second boss, and he suffers from middle kid syndrome, being forgotten and also the worst of the 3. Narratively, we reach him just as he's on the cusp of becoming a god. I found Simon to be thematically interesting. He's a man whose grand ambition of evolving humanity into gods is actually rooted in a very small and personal childhood trauma. Simon has the ability to read minds, and by using this power, he learned that his father saw him as a failure. This deeply upset him, and it's these daddy issues that drive his desire to create a world without lies, as well as to prove his worth. As a fight, Simon's just okay. On the positive end are the visuals, which are quite spectacular, particularly the second phase of the fight where you have literal arms reaching down from heaven as part of one attack. It reinforces the mustache-twirling evilness that Simon embodies. This unfortunately ties into the negatives, however, as the actual mechanics of the fight feel designed to prioritize this spectacle and scale over being mechanically interesting. I could see his phase 2 move of sending out disruption blasts being annoying, but it never killed me on any of my attempts, although maybe I just got lucky. Simon's just a sack of potatoes that swings a giant mace, and I don't have much else to say about him. It would have been disappointing if he was the final boss, but luckily he's not, and he actually hints at this with a final warning as he dies, to watch out for Geppetto. You then step onto the center platform and have a long elevator ride down to what looks like the base of the Abbey. In front of you, standing alone in the center of a chamber, is Geppetto. Before going into the specifics of the final boss or the game's endings, it's time to bring together some narrative threads and pieces of information from both the base game and its expansion in order to finally answer who our main character P is. It's helpful to do this now because it frames the game's biggest deviation from the Pinocchio source material. The first question about our identity likely came after defeating the Black Rabbit Brotherhood and finding the portrait that looked like P. When given to Geppetto, he hangs the portrait up but seems like he's hiding something.
To think that you have brought it back to me. Forgive a foolish old man his memories. Memories of a happier time, my son.
We then hear the name Carlo shortly after this for the first time from Romeo. The way he talks implies some sort of shared history between P and the King of Puppets, and this name has a clear effect on P, but it's not clear why. We later learn about awakened puppets and apply this knowledge to Romeo. He was powered by the ergo of his former human self. He remembered his friendship with an individual named Carlo and their shared history at the Monad charity house, where they were being trained by a legendary stalker to become stalkers themselves.
I'm Romeo. We grew up together in the Monad charity house. Remember? We're best friends. I'm Romeo. We're best friends.
In the base game, Romeo recognizes P as having Carlo's ergo, something that many players themselves will probably guess when witnessing the memories on the beach leading to the Abbey. Connecting all of this together, the portrait and Romeo's statements, it becomes clear that Carlo is Geppetto's dead son, and that P is a puppet made to look like him. The game doesn't fully explain the details around Carlo's death, but it's stated that it was from the petrification disease. We know this to be true because dying from the disease is required for an individual's ergo to crystallize after their death, and P is carrying Carlo's ergo within. It's never explicitly stated how he was infected, though. One of the notes I wrote during my first playthrough was that when entering the Relic of Trismegistus, we get this strange remark from Gemini.
Wait, is this the Relic of Trismegistus? You know, it's the strangest feeling. I think I've been here before. Maybe I haven't gotten all my memories back after all. I don't know exactly what's going on, but someone was dragged away from here. We have to follow. Hurry!
Initially, I thought that this was going to reveal backstory for him, but after playing Overture, I think it's actually a clue as to what happened to Carlo. Later in the expansion, a puppet named Rosa gives P a letter, which reveals that Carlo was invited by the alchemists to the Devil's Pit, which is another name for the Relic of Trismegistus. They claim to have discovered the great truth and wish to share their success with only the pinnacle of Krat society. It's not stated what happened here, but I think Carlo was tricked and exposed to the petrification disease. The expansion again offers some circumstantial evidence in the form of a recording between Leia, the legendary stalker, and a member of the alchemist order named Marchiona.
I am searching for my lost apprentice. And it should come as no surprise that I thought you or your other alchemist fiends had taken him. I hope you don't mind, but I made a mess of your lackeys as I passed through. If you do, consider it partial payment for what happened to my other apprentice.
The expansion is set soon after Carlo's death, and at the time of this audio log, Leia is searching for her other apprentice Romeo, who has gone missing. This recording heavily implies, in my opinion, that Marchiona was involved in Carlo's death, especially because another document found later explains that she was among the first who began experimenting with putting specific people's ergo into puppets, as well as creating the carcass mutating elixir. An additional note found in the expansion talks about a cruise ship capsizing and there being fatalities, highlighting that a family member of the workshop union's leader, who is Geppetto, is among them. Given the rest of the evidence, I believe this to be the story that the alchemists used to cover up Carlo's real death. Let's come up for air out of the lore real quick. I just want to say how cool I think this adaptation of the story is. The reveal that Geppetto built you to look like his dead son is a great twist on the original source material.
In my own way, I grew to love you. After all, you're the puppet who would bring my son back to life. I'm disappointed in you. I didn't mean for this to happen. I believed you were a good boy. If you refuse, then I'll have to retrieve it myself. My son.
Let's rewind. When first meeting Romeo at the Opera House, P watches a performance involving 3 puppets. One that looks like Geppetto takes the heart of another that looks like P and then implants it into a third, bringing it to life. This is exactly what Geppetto's trying to do in the game. He's been lying to you and the city, using the alchemist, the puppet frenzy, and P in a selfish attempt to bring his dead son Carlo back to life. By refusing to give up your heart, you unlock the final fight against the nameless puppet, who is Geppetto's first attempt at resurrecting Carlo. I like this a lot, that Geppetto isn't the kind father he's been presenting himself as. In fact, he's a deeply neglectful one. When his wife Camille died of the petrification disease, rather than working through their grief together, Geppetto dumps Carlo on Antonia and the Monad Charity House, something we see in Carlo's memories on the Abbey beach. In the DLC, we can find an unsent letter from Antonia to Geppetto in which she strongly encourages him to get his head out of his ass and be with his son. Because of his neglect and his priorities at the time, which I'll get into in a moment, Geppetto also loses Carlo to the petrification disease, which sets him firmly on the path that we're now seeing the end of. The DLC fleshes out where Geppetto gets the idea for resurrecting Carlo, and the answer is that he learned something similar happened with his wife Camille. The pair of them were inventors, and at some point when Carlo was young, Camille died from the petrification disease. Geppetto receives a letter from the head of the alchemists at the time, Valentinus, about her death, claiming it was a chemical leak. This could be another cover-up, but that's not what's important. A document found within the alchemist labs speak about a family member of Geppetto being a valuable research candidate due to her having a special connection to Ergo. The report is actually a reprimand because through unsanctioned experiments, this family member died. While not outright stated, in my opinion, this has to be referring to Camille. Geppetto is distraught afterwards and devotes himself entirely to his work, sending Carlo away to the Monad Charity House. The alchemists being the pragmatists that they are, and this being the early days of puppetry, they use Camille's Ergo in a made puppet. While serving a household, that puppet does something not in its programming and saves a baby that falls out of a crib. The alchemists collect the puppet and realize that Camille's ego has awoken in it, with it asking to be sent back to her child, meaning Carlo. It was again Marchiona that discovered all of this after she takes apart the made puppet and effectively kills it. This discovery is what gives her a more prominent role within the Alchemist Order. This then likely provides the reasoning for why the Alchemist Order would specifically target Carlo with their fake invitation. He was the son of Camille and would potentially have some of her abilities. Now, returning to Geppetto, it's unclear to me if he learns about the awakening of his wife's Ergo in the maid puppet only after Carlo's death, or if he himself was involved in the experimentation done on her. A line in his journal reads, quote, "Is this retribution for letting myself be blinded by grief and working with these alchemist devils?" Unquote. And I could sort of take that either way. That same journal states that he has learned, quote, "the devil's method," unquote, and details steps on resurrecting someone. Continuing on, Geppetto writes that he can still get his child back. This, to me, loops in the half-puppet, half-zombified Carlo corpse that Geppetto unleashes on us here at the end of the game. The nameless puppet is Geppetto's first failed attempt at resurrecting his son using Carlo's body. P is the second attempt. In the present, Geppetto needs 3 things to be successful this time: a large amount of Ergo, the Arm of God relic that Simon was using, and the heart containing Carlo's Ergo. All of these ingredients have converged here at the Abbey. The petrification disease, carcass monsters, and puppet frenzy all supply the Ergo. The arm relic keeps changing hands, pun intended, throughout the game, but is finally obtained by P after defeating Simon. And the heart is the P organ that has been with you since the beginning of the game. All of these things coming together here at the Abbey makes me think that it was Geppetto's plan all along to get captured. A minor nitpick is that it's never explained how Geppetto gets the box containing his son's corpse to the Alchemist Island. Now, in the chamber, Geppetto asks P to give up his heart, and refusing prompts the fight. So let's finally talk about it. It's a great final fight. It feels climactic, similar to the Simon Manas fight, while also being mechanically very difficult. The first phase offers a manageable, slower pace to start to learn his attacks before stepping on the gas for phase 2. The fight feels fair and like the evolution that the standard stalker fights should have been. He has complex swings, lunges, aerial attacks, and even the ability to heal himself. I like how Nameless Puppet's weapon is actually 2 blades stuck together, but for certain attack chains and combos he'll split the blades apart. It's a natural way to force the player to change focus on what they're parrying during the fight. And of course, thematically, again, it's a great fight. A nameless puppet fighting a nameless puppet. After beating the boss, there are 2 variants of the ending based on whether or not you gave Sophia peace earlier. The endings begin the same. The nameless puppet, free from Geppetto's control, attempts to make the killing blow on P, forcing Geppetto to step in the way and take the hit. P then finishes off the puppet and goes to his creator's side. In the game's true ending, this leads to a nice conclusion. Geppetto realizes what he could not see before. P has Carlo's personality, his looks, and is powered by his Ergo. For all intents and purposes, he is Carlo.
I'm sorry.
The ending then transitions to shortly after this. P finds a puppet designed like Sophia and decides to place her Ergo that he's been carrying into it. He collapses from exhaustion and Sophia awakens again. The other ending, where you did not give Sophia peace and don't have enough humanity, Geppetto calls P a useless puppet, and that's it. Credits.
You're just a useless puppet.
I don't like this second version, and that's in part because I think the third ending serves as a better bad conclusion. When Geppetto asks for your heart at the beginning of the encounter, you can actually agree to give it to him, which he takes with no hesitation, and this skips the fight with the nameless puppet. Instead, we see Geppetto install the heart, and we get a creepy scene back at Hotel Krat.
This finally feels like family. Thank you for returning, Carlo.
Is this truly the future you wanted?
After loading back in, you find all of the hotel NPCs have been replaced with eerie puppet versions after Carlo killed them all on Geppetto's orders. What's more is that even with Carlo now resurrected, Geppetto leaves him again. He writes a letter indicating that he's gone on to continue his work and to repair the city. He instructs Carlo to just stay safe inside the hotel, which makes Carlo, while technically a real boy, actually more of a puppet now. It's an excellent thematically opposite ending from the true ending, which is why I don't think the second one is necessary. Now, regardless of which ending you get, there's a hidden cutscene after the game's credits. Before going into this, however, I want to discuss the Overture expansion because the hidden cutscene teases the sequel's potential, and it makes more sense to discuss that at the end of the video. The Overture expansion is accessed through a special rusted stargazer near the Malum District. After activating it, P and Gemini wake up disoriented in a snowy forest. They arrive at a ridge overlooking the city, and this only furthers the confusion.
Is that? Yes, it is. That's Krat Zoo. How in the blazes? And I mean that literally. The zoo burned down a long time ago. Just give me a minute to think about this.
The Overture expansion is kind of not a prequel to the events of the base game. It's a continuation for our characters, but the Stargazer, likely using Ergo, transports P and Gemini back in time. The narrative is centered on finding Leia, the legendary stalker that Carlo and Romeo trained under, who vanished around this time. Initially, Gemini thinks this could be a chance to change history. Carlo has already died, but Leia and Romeo are still alive and could be saved from their future fates. In many ways, Overture is better than the base game. Its locations, with just one exception, are all great, and specifically its final chapter doesn't overstay its welcome. The winter environments are a thoughtful way to vary up the feeling of the city without demanding brand new environments, although there are plenty of those too. It continues the trend of compelling characters. I want to draw particular attention to this because it not only does a great job of expanding on characters we've met, like Alidoro and Arlecchino, but also introducing characters like Lumacchio and Leia the legendary stalker that we've only heard about. This extends to the story as well, which is great, even if your part in it is a bit small. Overture's bosses are a bit of a mixed bag, however. I found 2 of the 8 to be excellent, 1 to be good, and then the other 5 to range from fine to forgettable to awful. Having said that, the expansion does something with 2 of its boss fights, where a character can join the fight if you want them to. This felt like a more natural way than the Spectres to help struggling players, and I thought it was a great addition. Having now given my general thoughts, let's get into the expansion's first area, the Krat City Zoo, which might be my favorite setting in the whole game. The tone is set right from the beginning with the giraffe corpse at the zoo's entrance, and it's maintained throughout the different zones. The level introduces several new types of carcass animals: baboons, elephants, wolves, polar bears, and goddamn kangaroos. They're introduced at a steady pace as you move through the zoo, keeping the encounters fresh. But more importantly for me, they kept me guessing about what sort of fucked up creatures might be waiting in the next area. The first mini-boss of the expansion is located after you get through the entrance hall and first outdoor area. It's a carcass elephant that initially appears to just be a slightly more difficult version of one we fought in the entrance hall. The first one's back legs are broken, and so its movement is limited. The second one, despite being a healthy version, was initially underwhelming. Then it did this. This form has an extended range and incorporates a new free status effect into its attacks. Freeze drains your health and slows both your movement and attack speed. This felt a little half-baked design-wise, and I think a better effect could have been that your speed was still reduced, but instead of a health drain, it causes you to take double damage. This would have created a more unique effect that made the buildup of freeze something to actually worry about. Regardless, as it is, this is a good introduction to the status effect, which will be heavily used in the next chapter. After the mini-boss, you enter the next zone, which is the Savannah area, and it was one of the hardest for me because of its combination of baboon and kangaroo enemies, as well as the shit-flinging ranged baboons on the rope bridges above. This zone then leads to the expansion's first boss, Tyrannical Predator, which is another mutated carcass animal, this time a giant crocodile. Despite the cool reveal, especially with the teases earlier in the level of there being a killer crocodile, I don't like this boss for 3 reasons. First, it incorporates a lot of wide swipes, spins, and lunges that I had a hard time being able to read because it felt like they all looked the same. Second, many of these attacks have knockback to them, which was annoying for a boss that also has high speed. Which leads us to the third reason. Several of its moves could snap it quickly towards you from across the arena, making it hard to gauge parry and dodge timings. Maybe these are just a skill issue though. A final note is that one of its moves reminded me of a Scooby-Doo wind-up run that I couldn't unsee after making the connection. It of course ends in a grab move too, my favorite. Now narratively, the zoo is mainly just a pass-through. We learn earlier that Leia, the legendary stalker, is searching for Romeo, who disappeared while investigating the zoo. This will be the core narrative for the majority of the game. We are searching for Leia, who is searching for Romeo. This is why, despite the story itself being good, it doesn't feel like we personally are doing much besides chasing these characters. After the zoo, the goal becomes getting to Hotel Krat, however the gate forward is locked. This leads us to the nearby greenhouse and the chapter's main boss, Marchiona, the puppeteer of death and her special flying puppet. This is my favorite boss of the expansion, and despite it being 2 enemies, the fight feels manageable because of the connection between them. Marchiona controls the puppet with an electric leash, which will turn an orange color when the puppet is attacking and blue when it's passive. I like this for 2 reasons. First, this provides a smart visual cue to let you know an attack is coming, even if the winged puppet is off screen. Second, the tether between them also serves as a movement tool for Marchiona and is incorporated into many of her moves. Also, I recognize that I just criticized the Tyrannical Predator for having moves that could snap it across the arena, yet now I'm complimenting Marchiona for the same thing. This goes back to readability for me. This fight does a better job of feeling balanced and almost like a dance. I could often read the attacks even on my first couple attempts and without having memorized them. It just feels intuitive. The best way to handle the fight is to focus on Marchiona herself rather than the puppet, which will be revived if its health reaches 0. Marchiona mostly uses these blue energy orbs to attack in various patterns, with my favorite being one where she rapidly spins them around. Once at half health, the pair begin incorporating several combined area of effect attacks into their moveset. After beating Marchiona, you get the gate key and can continue towards Hotel Krat. After we leave the area, there's a cutscene showing us Leia finding a bloody scene. This scene establishes a number of important pieces of the story. First, that Leia recognizes this murder scene, indicating that the villain is someone she knows. Second, she finds Romeo's jacket left conspicuously out, indicating that the villain has him. And third is that P is following in Leia's immediate footsteps. The whole scene is quite intriguing. Even without it verbally said, it's understood that Romeo has been taken by whoever did this, but importantly, we don't get any further information on who that is yet. It serves as a great hook. For now, all we can do is continue on. To get to the hotel, we must pass through one more area, the Krat Carnival. Outside the entrance, we meet a puppet named Rosa. She's a cute character, but I don't have much to say about her. We can complete several side quests for her throughout the expansion, and by doing so we get pieces of a child's drawing that when put together reveal that Rosa was also made by Geppetto to serve as a companion for Carlo when he was younger. Now, similar to the greenhouse, the Krat Carnival is a smaller area. It's puppet-focused, featuring several new enemy types, as well as a parade master now serving as an elite enemy. You can play a couple of the carnival games and collect coins to unlock access to optional parts of the area, which was a highlight for me. Doing this leads to an optional encounter with a unique fire juggler puppet, which I enjoyed. Something lore-wise that seems inconsistent to me is that these carnival puppets are hostile. In the base game, puppets are hostile because of the puppet frenzy, but timeline-wise, I don't believe that the frenzy has started yet. This is just a minor thing, and perhaps I missed a document somewhere that explained why. Past the carnival, we arrive at Hotel Krat, which is disorganized and empty as it's still being set up for the grand opening. This creates a much colder feeling, which successfully differentiates the space from how it is in the base game. The expansion adds a new mechanic to the P organ, allowing you to enhance individual traits, which is a small but welcome addition. There are 2 NPCs in the hotel. The first is a merchant named Claus, and second is Lumacchio, the leader of the bastard subdivision of stalkers. Lumacchio will become an important character and boss later, but for now he points us to the nearby lift, marking the next part of Leia's trail. Taking the hotel lift down brings you to an underground laboratory called the Zelator facility. This is the area I mentioned earlier that seems like it was cut from the base game, and if that is the case, I'm glad the developers were able to reuse the area here because I think it's a well-designed level. The environment is a complex frozen lab that consists of narrow tunnels, walkways, and containment cells that often loop back on each other, creating smart shortcuts. The enemy encounters are designed around this tight geometry, frequently utilizing enemies that could attack straight on. This tight geometry also made it hard to get more than 1 or 2 hits in if you were using a swinging weapon, which I typically would be, by the way. Almost all of the weapons I invested in were swinging weapons. That made this level challenging for me in a way I really enjoyed. The first big area is the containment cells, which have a puzzle-like aspect to them. Figuring out how to navigate the 3-story cell block with its locked doors often required thinking about the space vertically, leading to the use of ladders and destroyed walls to maneuver around blocked doors in clever ways. The containment area finishes with a fight against an elite enemy wielding a ball and chain. Now, similar to the Krat Zoo, we then get a mid-chapter boss fight, this one against a stalker named Veronique, who's the leader of the Sweeper subdivision. The Sweepers are the rival faction to Lumacchio's bastards. Veronique is another great evolution of the stalker fights, feeling completely unique from any of the previous fights in the base game. Between her, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, the White Lady, and Lumacchio later, this is what the stalker battles should have been. Unique fights each built around a mechanic rather than more or less copy-pasted filler fights. Having said that, I don't think the Lumacchio fight is actually good. He might be my least favorite boss in the entire game, but I can still appreciate how different it feels. Here, Veronique feels different because her movement is creatively based around her weapon, a massive 2-handed hammer with an engine within. For example, as the fight progresses, she uses a downward hammer swing to launch herself into the air and towards you in a cannonball attack. Another would be where she spins around like a cyclone. The engine is also used to test player spatial awareness, as several of Veronique's attacks leave behind fire, which can lead to the overheat debuff. This was done in a good way too. To begin with, it's just a few specific attacks, but in her second phase, she cranks the engine on the hammer to add fire to all of her attacks. After the fight and as she dies, Veronique apologizes, stating that the alchemist's supposed cure had twisted her mind. Defeating her allows P to turn off the lab's coolant system and gain access into the deeper parts of the facility. This leads to finally meeting the real Alidoro, who we find is in the lab investigating the alchemists. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a cool moment. The voice actor did a great job of giving the character a real quiet strength that differentiates him from the imposter in the base game. Alidoro primarily sets up two things. First, he provides the next step for locating Leia, stating that she has several base camps along the coast and that we should check those. Second, he sets up the upcoming boss, explaining that the alchemists recently excavated a nearby mine and within found a powerful relic as well as the remains of the ancient warrior that protected it. They took the remains and began using them in their experiments, creating the two-faced Overseer, who serves as the chapter's boss. Briefly, before discussing him, I want to mention the area right before the fight, the Carcass Lab. It features a good mix of Carcass enemies and a new freezing variant of the alchemists, which I enjoyed. The area has bodies hanging from chains, laboratory equipment everywhere, and an oppressive, dingy atmosphere. It expertly uses the environment to convey how immoral and horrific the alchemists and their experiments truly are. Now for the two-faced Overseer. The boss itself was unimpressive. It attacks by swinging its giant club axe weapon, and at certain points will go into a berserk state, indicated by its Futurama head turning from green to red. From what I could find online, this berserk state is not tied to its health, but rather its stagger meter, meaning the closer you are to staggering, the more aggressive it'll become. It then reverts back to the regular state after actually being staggered. It's an interesting concept, but didn't feel that impactful. Now, my favorite thing about this fight actually has nothing to do with the boss, but rather how it changes the Spectre summon system. When you meet Alidoro earlier, he gives you a horn item that you can use to summon him during the fight. It's a small change that I really like because it adds a story element to the summoning system. Narratively, it feels like Alidoro should be there fighting this creature with you. Of course, you don't have to summon him, and you don't miss anything if you don't, other than his sick jumping through the window entrance. And this is all I really have to say about the boss. After beating it, your only way forward is to go deeper down into the alchemist excavation site. This chapter begins with a conversation with Lumacchio, who just so happens to now be there.
This is alchemist territory. One might say this place is where all the Ergo we use comes from. But the alchemists found something else underground. Something so dangerous, most of them fled. They'd say, retreated. Only mining puppets left in there now, still working away. But that doesn't make it safe. Let caution be your watchword.
Lumacchio is the expansion's standout character for me. He's voiced by Neil Newbon, the man who voiced Asterion in Baldur's Gate 3, and he does just as great of a job here. His voice fits the character's visual design perfectly, blending the elegance with a creepy undertone, just like with Asterion. This conversation in the mines clearly telegraphs that he's a villain. When asked why he's in the mines, he dodges the question. He then asks if you have any injuries and feigns relief that you don't. He also just straight up says that he's not a hero.
And as I reflected, I've learned I simply do not have the courage for, self-sacrifice. I'm no hero. There is no greatness within this coward's body.
It's good build-up for the eventual fight with him in the next chapter. A final note before getting into the level is that there are two important narrative reveals that can occur at Hotel Krat if we talk with Alidoro, who is set up there. First, he reveals that Leia has the petrification disease, and then second, that the likely culprit in Romeo's abduction is the puppet Arlecchino.
As I suspected, Romeo's disappearance is linked to Leia's history. Perhaps you don't know. Long ago, Leia neutralized an infamous killer puppet. This act may be part of its revenge. At the moment, we know nothing of this puppet's whereabouts. That is what troubles me most. Look into the name Arlecchino.
Yes, the King of Riddles himself makes a return as the big bad guy in the expansion. Initially, this was something I didn't like, however, as the story develops, my opinion changed. Arlecchino is one of the core reasons the expansion's narrative feels more personal and character-focused. Okay, now let's get into the level. The Ergo mining site and ancient ruins are the worst areas in the expansion. Visually, they're, well, ruins and mining tunnels. They're dressed up a bit with snow and icicles, but by and large, they return to the visual identity of the nature/outdoor segments of the base game. There's a lot of wooden walkways, rope bridges, and rocks. Enemy-wise, there are several new puppet models introduced, all revolving around mining functions like drilling or collecting rocks. Mechanically, they don't do anything substantially different though from the similarly designed model we see in the base game at the Grand Exhibition Hall. The two exceptions are both elite enemies. The first wields a club and can also lay down proximity mines in the environment. This was a cool idea and I like that it gets used twice, once here and then again later as we exit the mines. The second elite enemy is a giant drill bulldozer, which I completely forgot about until I was reviewing the footage for scripting, which should tell you how interesting this fight is. For bosses, there's an optional hidden one in the Ergo mining site, the pre-metamorphic Green Hunter, which is a smaller, younger version of the base game's Green Swamp monster. It has many of the same moves, tentacle swipes, charging you, and burrowing underground. Added to its moveset though is now a grab attack where it steals your health to heal itself. There's actually two versions of it and I got hit with them back to back once. Loved that, by the way. Now, because we're in the past and presumably this is the same creature we fight in the Barren Swamps, we don't get to kill it. It runs away and we just move on. The chapter's main boss is Anguished Guardian of the Ruins, and it's a giant humanoid spider creature wielding several weapons. It's a monstrous thing, but I found playing aggressively and focusing on the spikes coming out of its eye and left hand were the best options. Attacking them does more damage, and the game does a good job of trying to teach you this by having them sparkle blue when hit. In its second phase, Anguished Guardian gets a power-up from God, I guess, and can now shoot lasers. There are two different versions of this attack, and in this footage that's playing you can see me get hit by both of them back to back. The first is a straight shot that just travels outwards from the boss, and then the second is a side sweep, although there are two versions of this one too. There's a single sweep and then a back and forth version. Additionally, there's also a move where Anguished stabs the ground with one of the spears and does an area of effect attack that you have to be quick to avoid. The summoned Spectre is too stupid to dodge any of these, by the way, which was fun to watch. After the fight, we locate Leia's camp at the exit of the ruins. She's of course not there, but through an audio recording we learn that she is heading to a place called the Rosa Estate to confront Arlecchino and rescue Romeo. So naturally, we follow. The frozen coast initially appears to be more winding rocky paths and tunnels, but this quickly gives way to a foggy ship graveyard. This area is one of the best designed in the entire game in my opinion. The level sees you bouncing between the destroyed ships and the Alchemist fleet and the thin, icy pathways that connect the ships. The area is mostly straightforward, which works in its favor in my opinion, giving it a tight, focused feeling. The big enemy types for the chapter are the alchemists and carcasses, although there are puppets sprinkled in here and there. We see a new subgroup of alchemist enemies, wearing black robes rather than brown like in the base game. They also all wear golden masks. Mechanically, this doesn't change anything, as these new versions fight similarly to the standard ones, but narratively, this is our first sign that there's infighting within the Alchemist Order. We can even find bodies of the original brown-robed guys among the wreckage of several of the ships, confirming this. For carcasses, the main new addition are the mutated marlin-type fish that jump out of the sea. They move chaotically when out of water, and I found using the puppet string Legion arm to pull them towards me was a great help and avoided the potential to get knocked off the small ice bridges. For bosses, this chapter has just one, Lumacchio. In his pre-fight monologue, he reveals that the infighting between the alchemists forced him to pick a side. He agreed to work for Simon Manas in exchange for their petrification cure. He was given the task of dealing with both Leia, the legendary stalker, as well as his rival Veronique. Like all of the bosses, this fight has two phases, and I actually really like the first one, outside of some absolutely absurd attack range. Lumacchio incorporates smoke bombs, regular bombs, and his umbrella into several of his moves, and I thought this was a pretty cool design. Again, reiterating what I've said about the other Stalker fights, this one feels unique, even in this first phase. After you've cleared about a third of his health, he briefly enters an invulnerable state and drinks the elixir crafted by the alchemists. This heals him and the fight continues. After clearing about 2/3 of his health, he again enters an invulnerability state, but this time begins mutating. Turns out the alchemists lied to him, and instead of giving him a cure, they gave him the elixir they use to turn people into carcasses. This once again heals him and starts the second phase with the now slimy mutant carcass version. Lumacchio knows about this fake elixir, by the way, because during the fight he states that he believed he was given the real cure, not this fake one. Both conceptually and narratively, I like this second phase. It reinforces the narrative, continues to build Lumacchio's character, and changes how the fight works. He's no longer using smoke bombs and is instead rampaging around. Now, having said that, I actually hated playing this second half. Lumacchio now has incredibly long range with incredibly long combos that inflict decay with every strike. Many of his attacks cause knockback whether parried or not, which led to me getting pushed against the wall or into corners. It seems designed to be constantly draining your stamina and weapon durability, meaning you can't take advantage of any of the small opportunities because you have to replenish those. It's a shame because, like I said, I really like the idea of this fight. After the boss, it's more ships and frozen pathways. Importantly, in the brig of one of the ships, we learn through a note and audio recording that the alchemists are responsible for what's currently happening with Arlecchino. We learn that after Leia previously defeated the puppet, the alchemists secretly swooped in and collected the remains. They saw Arlecchino as a potential weapon they could use, so they not only repaired him, but fitted him with upgrades to make him more deadly. Of course, this doesn't work out for them as Arlecchino violently escapes, and that's where the expansion story begins. There's a small final area for the chapter, an abandoned fishing town. There's not much to do here outside of a lighthouse where you can solve a puzzle for an Alidoro side quest, and then there's an optional mini-boss. I haven't talked about many of the game's side quests in this video, and that's because I found most to not be worth it. Having said that, in the expansion you can complete a series of 3 small tasks for Alidoro as part of his quest for justice against the alchemists. They don't offer much, but the final one, which is here at the lighthouse, was my favorite. It involved figuring out how to solve a minor puzzle with a weight-sensitive pressure plate. With the mini-boss, it's a carcass shark you can find near the shore. It's a pretty standard fight, elevated greatly by an awesome intro where it bursts from the body of a nearby dead whale. Proceeding forward past the fishing town finally brings us face to face with Leia. She has a great presence and lives up to the lore surrounding the character. This goes double for the next chapter when we get to fight alongside her for portions of it. Here she explains a bit more of her background with Arlecchino as well as her apprentices, Romeo and Carlo. The chapter ends with P offering to help her fight the puppet and her accepting.
The last time I fought Arlecchino, I just barely managed to get the upper hand. And that was when I was healthy. There's no guarantee I'll win this time. With Romeo's life at stake, I accept your help. From one stalker to another, I, Leia Florence, ask you to fight with me.
The pair then make their way to the Monad Charity House. Overture is about uncovering hidden truths. What happened to the legendary stalker? What happened to Valentinus, the former leader of the alchemists? How Romeo became the king of puppets? The final chapter uses the Monad charity house to tie all of these mysteries together while also cleverly revealing that the base game lied to us. Throughout Lies of P, we've heard about the Monad charity house. It's where Carlo was dumped by Geppetto as a child and where he and Romeo trained under Leia to become stalkers. Supposedly, at some point in time, the estate suffered an extreme outbreak of the petrification disease, which killed everyone within and required the place to be quarantined off. Overture reveals that this is a lie.
What happened here? Wait, could this be the Monad Charity House tragedy? But that was the petrification disease, wasn't it? This is just a massacre.
The petrification disease story was simply the cover-up for the actual events, which were both horrific and deliberate. In the entrance hall of the estate, P and Leia discover a scene left for them by Arlecchino, Romeo's arms severed and hung up for display. This upsets Leia and prompts P to continue the search for Romeo on his own. There's not much to say about the level itself because it's primarily about atmosphere in the narrative rather than a complex design. There are bodies and blood everywhere, as well as recently turned carcasses. I say recently turned because many of the initial carcasses we meet in the level won't attack you as you approach, instead they seem to be internally fighting against the mutations. There are many lore documents found throughout the estate that fill in the events leading up to this. Summarizing them, we learn that it was Simon specifically who procured the body of Arlecchino in hopes to study it, and many alchemists reported their discomfort with this to Valentinus, who in turn did nothing. At some point, Valentinus makes a decision himself to give the Arm of God relic to the Archbishop of the St. Frangelico's Cathedral. A minor comment here is that this information seems to clash with what the base game establishes, which is that one of the cathedral's nuns stole the artifact, although maybe it was being passed back and forth. Regardless, this decision is the straw that breaks the camel's back for the alchemists. One document orders that the Monad Charity House as well as the St. Frangelico's Cathedral be purified with the divine elixir. The conclusion we can reach is that Simon used Valentinus' decision with the Arm of God relic to launch the coup he had been slowly orchestrating. The divine elixirs transformed everyone into the carcass creatures we see at both the Charity House and the Cathedral in the base game. Within the estate, we can also find Sophia's room, which makes sense given that she's Valentinus' daughter. Her room shows signs of a struggle, yet no blood, which indicates to me that this was likely when she was abducted by Simon. Lastly, through a note and a family portrait, we learn that Leia is also the stepdaughter of Valentinus. The two had a good relationship, but Leia made the decision to leave the family due to the darkness she saw her father involved in. It's this event I would guess was the catalyst for Valentinus' change of heart and decision with the Arm of God relic. Now, having gone through all of that, we arrive at the expansion's final boss, Arlecchino, the Blood Artist.
Where's the legend I faced before? Shut up, you filthy puppet! Oh, no. I must ask. Did you actually believe you could save your beloved apprentice?
Similar to the fight with the two-faced overseer, instead of summoning a specter, this boss allows for a narrative character to join the fight, this time Leia. The first phase doesn't offer much to discuss, it's cinematic but straightforward. The second phase though, oof.
Go on then, show me! Share your pain! Show me your truest fears!
As you wish. I will carve dread into your eyes that will haunt you forever!
Got you!
Not even close!
Everything about this fight is great. The intro bombardment, the voice acting, the variety in visuals of the moves, the music. There's even an awesome combo move P and Leia do when Arlecchino is staggered. Outside of these comments, though, I don't have specific criticisms. I'm sure there's some nuances with the moveset that I missed because I beat him with Leia, but I'm okay with that. Truth be told, it was a difficult fight for me even with her involved and often taking his focus. The fight ends with a cinematic of you using Leia's special rose sword to remove Arlecchino's limbs and defeat him. Presumably, the alchemist again snatch his body after this because we have to eventually find him years later in the base game. I've read online that there's a special interaction you can get if you complete the expansion and then go talk to Arlecchino in the Abbey. He can be asked about the fight and will apologize for not remembering you previously. After the fight, there's a cutscene showing Leia holding Romeo, whose arms were replaced with prosthetics at some point by Arlecchino, I guess. Importantly, though, Romeo is still alive. Leia thanks P for his help and comes to the conclusion as he disappears that he felt so familiar to her because he's Carlo, or at least a remnant of him. After the credits, there's a continuation of this scene with Leia and Romeo that explains why no one in the present knows what happened to her. She was killed by the nameless puppet. Geppetto must have then either infected Romeo with the petrification disease shortly after this while he was in his weakened state, or later manipulated Romeo into agreeing to become a puppet. While not outright stated, it's implied to me that Geppetto only kills Leia because she's in the wrong place at the wrong time. He needs Romeo as part of his plan to resurrect Carlo, likely as a test subject to perfect the process he's discovered from the alchemists, the devil's method as he describes it. There's a final audio recording from Leia that can be found in her secret room within Hotel Krat, and it further deepens her character and expands on her relationship with Carlo.
After breaking ties with the Monad family, I was lost. I could barely take care of myself. So taking responsibility for you and Romeo, it was more than I could bear at the time. But in the end, you two saved me. You washed away all the spite and hatred in my heart. Legendary stalker. A worthless title. That cruel end should never have been your fate.
The ending is bittersweet, and that goes to Overture's big theme, accepting the past and using it to move forward. P and Gemini accept that they can alter the past to change the future like they hoped, and Leia comes to accept Carlo's death and her feelings of being responsible. The final line of her audio recording is about wishing she could watch the sunrise with Carlo again, and her final moments with P before he vanishes is them doing exactly this. Having now gone through the expansion, let's finally circle back to the after-credits scene in the base game. It reveals that another unexpected character was lying to us the entire game, Giangio, the weird alchemist from the hotel whose true identity is Paracelsus. He informs someone over the phone that the Krat experiment he was stationed to observe ended with a new form of eternal life being created, presumably Ergo and puppetry. It's the final line and accompanying scene that are particularly interesting, though.
And when I return, I will find her. For sure. Another key of ours. Dorothy.
At the time of recording, the developers have revealed nothing about the game's sequel, so we still don't know how this will all be translated. My hope is for a sequel, maybe titled Lies of Oz, set in the Wizard of Oz universe, with you playing as Dorothy. Whatever the case though, I have complete faith in the studio. Lies of P has become one of my favorite games. Ever. It made me a believer that this genre can tell a good story if the developers want to, and I eagerly await the sequel. Thank you for watching, and I hope I didn't make any Souls fans angry with my commentary, but then again, if I did, that's okay too. One of the reasons I really wanted to make this video is because most of what you hear about the genre, especially on YouTube or in the deeper gaming communities, is from veterans. From people who have already sunk hundreds, maybe thousands of hours into Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, etc., and their insights are often invaluable because of it. They can break down every combat nuance, every build, and every bit of lore. But what that often misses completely, at least in my opinion, is what it's like for someone just dipping their toes into the genre for the first time. That perspective is what I hope I provided with this video. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. I don't think I'll make any other videos for games in this genre, but if after hearing why I liked Lies of P so much, you think there's another game I should perhaps try, please let me know in the comments. I'm open-minded. The next video will be on Halo Reach. Now, as tradition, I have some extra thoughts that didn't fit into the script anywhere and that I thought I'd just fire off here at the end. First, I really liked that the different costumes don't change your stats and were purely cosmetic. Not enough games seem to get this in my opinion, and it's annoying. The modern God of Wars are an example, and it leads to me wearing suboptimal armor just because I like the look better. Next, I also liked that the game was willing to break many of its own mechanics as you progressed into New Game Plus, such as pulse cells and Legion becoming rechargeable on their own, or the ability to carry another weapon or Legion arm entirely. It allowed for great customization and actually made New Game Plus feel like you had upgrades to work towards. Finally, I just wanted to mention that Lies of P reminded me of the comic series Fables by Bill Willingham. If you've not heard of this series, it's what Telltale's The Wolf Among Us is based on. It's a great series for the first 75 issues, and I highly recommend it if you were as interested in the world of Lies of P as I was. And that's all I got. Take care.